Hey guys, tonight we slip into the frost-bitten breath of Victorian London. Imagine it. Your shoes are worn so thin they barely shield you from the cobblestones. Your coat hangs like a wet rag, and winter's bite slides through every hole in the fabric. The sky above is a smudge of ash gray, refusing to brighten even though the day is technically over. The sun sets early in December here, and already the lamps sputter to life, dripping yellow light across streets slick with mud and horse dung. You breathe out, and your breath fogs like smoke from a dying fire. You probably won't survive this, and yet here you are, treading forward, ribs aching with hunger, toes curled against the creeping frost. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and the local time down below. Let's see where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Strike the cobblestones with that uneven thump. Heel then toe, heel then toe. The rhythm almost hypnotic, except the cold distracts you. Each gust of air rolls straight off the Thames, threading through alleyways, sneaking past collars, and searing down your chest like you swallowed a handful of snow. You tug your coat tighter, though coat might be generous. It's more of a cloth shroud, once perhaps navy blue, now threadbare and streaked with mud. Some men on Fleet Street still wear wool overcoats buttoned up to their throats. Fashionable things with brass buttons that glint under the lamplight. Not you. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a darkened shop window and don't even recognize the shadow. Hollow cheeks, hair sticking to your forehead in clumps, and eyes tired enough to make you look twice your age. Historians still argue whether the winter of 1860 or 1867 was harsher, but to your body it makes no difference. This night alone feels lethal enough. The cobbles glisten, slick with a thin rime of ice that makes the horses stumble. One carriage nearly topples, the driver yanking on the reins and cursing loud enough that the words echo against the walls. You don't even flinch. Language in these streets is as common as soot in the lungs. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls. You count the strokes. 6. Early yet, but the shadows already claim the streets. Funny thing about Victorian London, by this time, gas lights flickered all along the main avenues, but their reach ended quickly. You step from one puddle of weak golden light into another, then into long stretches of darkness, where the wind sounds like whispers plotting against you. It's the kind of darkness where you swear you see a face leaning out from the bricks, until you blink and realize it's just your mind looking for company. The smell doesn't help either. London in winter is not crisp and fresh. It's coal smoke thick enough to chew, mixed with manure, rot, and the sour breath of tavern-spilling men into the gutters. You gag once, then laugh quietly at yourself, because the stink might be awful, but it's still proof you're alive. Your stomach growls loud. Even the rats scamper away as if embarrassed on your behalf. Last meal? Hard to say. Maybe a crust of bread yesterday morning traded for a shoe buckle. Maybe you're dreaming half the meals anyway. Apples that never existed. Steaming potatoes turning to ash when you bite them. Hunger plays tricks, and tonight you are its favorite target. You pass a bakery. The windows are steamed, yellow light glowing behind them, and through the misted glass you see rows of fresh loaves, plump, golden, still steaming, their crusts cracking open like they're sighing in warmth. A woman inside sprinkles flour over them, humming as though the world isn't freezing outside. You press your forehead to the glass for one dangerous second. Then you move on. You've already been warned once. Lingering too long marks you as suspicious, and suspicious earns you a constable stick across the ribs. The city feels endless, yet claustrophobic. Street after street of soot-stained brick, chimneys belching like dragons. Even the Thames doesn't help. It looks frozen, not on the surface, but in spirit, sluggish and dark. Once, when you had energy, you imagined ships there carrying people to warmer places. Now you only think, what if I slipped in? Would the cold water be any worse than this air gnawing your bones? The thought vanishes as quickly as it came. Your body clings stubbornly to life, no matter how weary the mind. A cart rattles past, pulled by a horse so thin its ribs show. On the back, coal piled high and black as midnight. Men with money will shovel that into hearths tonight, warming parlors and nurseries. You'll have to settle for the faint heat that sometimes seeps from bakeries or, if you're lucky, the warmth of another body pressed against yours under a railway arch. Even so, don't get too romantic about it. Fleas are very social creatures. What surprises you most, though, is how crowded the streets remain. Not with carriages or wealthy shoppers, they vanish as the hour grows late, but with people like you, huddled figures, scarves wound around their faces, children clutching at sleeves, men muttering to themselves. London holds more than 2 million souls by this point, and a shocking number of them slip through the cracks. Official records say 1 in 5 families lived in poverty so severe they couldn't afford proper housing. Historians still argue whether the statistics underestimated the problem, but when you look around, it's clear. Numbers never do justice to misery. A boy runs past you barefoot, toes purple against the ice. You mutter something, curse, prayer, maybe both, but he's gone before you finish. Somewhere else, a woman leans against a lamppost, shawl pulled tight, pretending not to shiver. You pass her too. Everyone pretends something here. Pretending is how you survive. Your hands ache now, fingers stiff, nails cracked, skin splitting at the knuckles. You try blowing into your palms, rubbing them together, but the warmth is gone the moment it sparks. Fire would be salvation, but fire is luxury. Even chimney soot would feel like velvet now. And then, the sound, the crunch of frost under your soles as you cross into a square. Statues loom, green with age, watching you with stone patience. A fountain stands dry, its basin dusted with ice. You think about curling up inside, but the marble would leach the heat faster than air. So you keep walking, chasing warmth that isn't there. The truth presses harder with every step. Night is only beginning, and you have to find somewhere, anywhere, to rest before your legs buckle. The lamps hiss and flicker as you shuffle deeper into the narrow lanes, searching for somewhere, anywhere, that won't feel like the jaws of winter closing around you. Each doorway looks promising for a second. You pause, tilt your head, imagine curling up on the stone step. But the cold radiates off the bricks, seeping into your bones, even from a distance. You move on. If you sit too soon, you'll never get back up. Your breath fogs like a ghost that refuses to leave you. Every exhale hangs heavy in the air, then vanishes as if embarrassed by its own weakness. It's not just cold. It's a kind of cruelty. The wind doesn't simply blow. It finds the gaps in your rags and needles your skin like some Victorian acupuncturist gone mad. You pass a butcher's shop now dark, its window smeared with fat. Behind the glass, carcasses hang on hooks, stiff and pale, the smell of blood faint but unmistakable. In summer, it would have been unbearable, flies buzzing like devils. But tonight, the winter air scrubs the scent, leaving only silence. The slabs inside are probably warmer than the stone you're walking on. The thought stings. Around you, London doesn't sleep. Not really. The rich tuck into their feather beds, yes, but the streets never quite surrender to silence. Draymen haul barrels, hawkers shout about oysters gone cheap, and night watchmen clang their staves. You're just another shadow slipping past. To them, you don't exist until you block the doorway. Then you exist too much. Historians still argue whether the infamous vagrancy laws were intended to help the poor or just keep the wealthy comfortable. Either way, constables use them like blunt tools, moving people along if they lingered. A doorway might be heaven to you, but to a shopkeeper, it's blasphemy. You remember one constable last week, lantern in one hand, truncheon in the other, grunting, "Not here, lad, not tonight." Then the shove came, not cruel, but firm enough to bruise. The law is less about justice and more about tidying the streets like a broom. And so, you keep searching. Maybe a bridge arch, maybe a coal shed. You once spent a night in the corner of Smithfield Market, tucked between crates that stank of fish. The smell clung to your hair for days, but at least the wooden boxes broke the wind. Tonight, though, every open space seems already claimed. A doorway holds a coughing man, wrapped in a coat that might once have been military. A bench cradles two women huddled together, their shawls barely covering their knees. You think about asking if there's room, but their eyes flash warning in the gaslight. Territory matters here. Hunger joins the cold now, like a cruel duet. Your stomach gurgles, and you press a hand against it as though holding the sound in might soothe the ache. You pass a roasted chestnut seller still working under a tattered umbrella. The smell alone nearly knocks you to your knees, warm, nutty, rich. You pat your pocket, knowing before you do, empty, not a farthing. You watch the vendor hand over a small paper bag to a gentleman in gloves. The steam rising from the chestnuts looks like something divine. You lick your lips and force yourself to walk on. A scrap of memory surfaces. Last winter, you found warmth by sleeping in the stairwell of a tenement near Whitechapel. The tenants were poor but not cruel. They looked away when they saw you curled on the bottom step. Maybe you could find it again? But then you remember the landlord, big man, red beard, dragging you out one dawn by the collar. "My stairs ain't your blanket," he'd barked. The bruise on your shoulder lasted longer than the warmth had. Funny thing, Victorian London boasted hundreds of thousands of houses, yet so many sat empty because the rent was absurd. You pass one now, shutters locked tight, ivy clawing at the walls. Inside, it's probably warmer than the Palace of Dreams. But the door is barred, the windows thick. You chuckle at the thought of squeezing through the letter slot like a desperate cat. Your legs ache. Each step feels heavier, your boots stiff as boards. You glance around and see other wanderers like you. An old woman muttering hymns, a boy gnawing at what might be a stolen crust, Two men drunk enough to forget the temperature. Misery loves company, though here it mostly avoids eye contact. And then the alley, narrow, foul-smelling, but empty. The bricks shield you from the worst of the wind. You step inside, lean back against the wall, and close your eyes. For a moment, just a moment, you imagine staying. But water drips steadily from some gutter above, landing right on your shoulder. You laugh under your breath. Bitter, but genuine, of course. Not even the alleys cut you a break. Historians still debate whether London's countless common lodging houses were more curse than blessing. For a penny, sometimes less, you could get a space on a floor, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, lice hopping between you like gossip. You think of those places now. Filthy, dangerous, but at least warmer than this alley. But pennies are as rare for you as goose dinners, so the street remains your bed. You wander again, past St. Paul's looming like a stone guardian, its dome fading into fog, past taverns spilling out laughter so warm it sounds like another world, past the newspaper boy shouting headlines you can't afford to read. Somewhere a dog barks, somewhere else a fiddle scrapes a drunken tune. London never truly sleeps, and that makes it harder for you to rest. At last, you stop in a doorway. Just for a minute, you tell yourself. The stone bites at your spine, the wind slices your cheek, but at least you're still upright. You hug your arms across your chest, rub your shoulders, and try to pretend the numbness spreading through your fingers is comfort, not danger. The truth settles heavy as frost. Finding warmth in Victorian London isn't about comfort, it's about compromise. Every spot has a price, and tonight you can't afford even the cheapest one. The thought of the workhouse hovers in your mind like a crow circling overhead, promising both survival and humiliation. You walked past the tall brick walls before, grim fortresses with barred windows, doors that creak only for those desperate enough to surrender. They loom like prisons, though officially they're not supposed to be. Still, you can't shake the feeling that stepping inside would mean giving up something invisible but precious. Your scraps of freedom. Everyone talks about them differently. Some say the workhouses are salvation, places where the poor are fed, clothed, and sheltered through the bitterest nights. Others spit the word like poison. Bastilles for the poor, they mutter, comparing them to prisons built for crimes you never committed. And honestly, both descriptions might be true. Historians still argue whether Victorian reformers genuinely meant to help the poor or simply wanted to punish idleness. Either way, you know one thing for certain. Once you walk through those doors, you won't come out the same. You remember a man you met last winter? Thomas, with a crooked nose and a laugh that cracked like old wood. He told you he'd gone in once, just for a few weeks when the snow nearly killed him. He had to strip, bathe under cold water while someone watched, and hand over every possession, even his boots. They shaved his hair close to the scalp and gave him a rough uniform that made everyone look identical. "Easier to forget who you are that way," he'd said, shaking his head. When he finally left, he swore never to return, even if it meant freezing. But tonight, the cold claws deeper and your stomach knots tighter. You find yourself staring at one of those looming buildings, windows glowing faintly, smoke drifting from a chimney. The idea of a bed, even a hard one, sends a painful longing through your chest, and food, even watery gruel, feels like a banquet compared to air and desperation. You edge closer. The workhouse gate creaks in the wind, iron bars slick with frost. A sign hangs crooked, naming the parish that oversees it. The rules are known by heart, even without reading. Men separated from women, parents split from children, silence demanded at meals, labor expected for every scrap you're given. It's not the labor that frightens you, though hauling stones or picking oakum until your fingers bleed sounds less than ideal. It's the stripping away. Your name might remain, but your dignity gets left at the door. The uniform doesn't care if you once had a trade or a family or a life. Inside, everyone is simply pauper. Historians point out that the Poor Law of 1834 was supposed to deter idleness, make the workhouse so unappealing that only the truly desperate would enter. Well, congratulations, Parliament. You nailed it. Even now, standing outside, shivering so hard your teeth chatter, you hesitate. Is survival worth the humiliation? The air smells of coal smoke from the workhouse kitchen. You imagine a pot of stew simmering, onions floating, maybe even a scrap of meat if the gods are feeling generous. Your stomach growls so loud you almost laugh. And yet, a whisper in your mind reminds you, you'll trade hunger for chains of routine under the eyes of a master who sees you as less than human. You shift your weight and remember another fringe detail someone once told you. Some clever paupers would check in for the winter, then escape come spring, as if treating the workhouse like a seasonal inn. Whether that's myth or memory warped by frostbite, who can say? But the thought lingers, tempting. You could endure the cold walls for a few months, couldn't you? But then you recall the children. Last year, you saw a girl no older than 7 dragged away from her mother at those very gates. The wailing still rings in your ears, a sound colder than snow. That was the rule. No families together, no tenderness allowed, only uniformity. Your fingers twitch on the gate. It would be so easy to push, to step in, to surrender. But pride is stubborn. You imagine your friends on the street, scraps of a community, ragged but free, laughing bitterly if you showed up in workhouse gray. So you pull your hand back, stuff it under your armpit for warmth, and stagger away. The building looms behind you, its chimney smoke twisting into the night sky like a cruel reminder. Salvation waits there, but only if you're willing to pay with your soul. Tonight, you're not ready for that bargain. The streets swallow you again, their noises louder after the eerie hush of the workhouse gate. A drunk man staggers past, singing some half-forgotten ballad, his voice cracked but weirdly joyful. You envy him, not his drink, but his oblivion. To be numb in this weather would be a blessing. Historians still debate whether workhouses reduced poverty or just reshuffled it, hiding the poor behind walls so the wealthy could ignore them. Looking at your own hands cracked and bleeding, you suspect the answer doesn't matter much. The poor remain poor, and the rich remain warm. The night deepens. The fog thickens, curling between lampposts, swirling around your ankles like some mischievous spirit. You keep walking, bones aching, heart heavy, trying not to imagine how much warmer you'd be on the other side of those gates. And yet, a part of you whispers that refusing the workhouse means you've kept something intact, something invisible but stubborn. Freedom, dignity, call it what you like, it's yours tonight, even if your bed is nothing more than a slab of icy stone. You leave the workhouse gate behind, and the cold rewards your stubbornness by making your stomach roar like a theater crowd at curtain time. The city answers with smells, glorious, torturous smells, spilling out of every alley. First comes the roasted chestnut cart, coals glowing like dragon eyes. The vendors shovel flicking shells so they crack with soft pops. Steam rises in gentle ribbons, sweet and smoky, and you edge closer until the heat licks your knuckles. The man in the cap shakes the pan once, twice, and the scent is so rich you swear you could eat the air instead. Your pockets, unfortunately, serve only lint. The cries of the night hawkers carry down the street, sing-song and practiced hot chestnuts, fine and hot. Baked taters, baked nice and floury, whelks, winkles. Their voices weave through the hiss of gas lamps and the clop of hooves, forming the kind of lullaby only hunger finds soothing. You drift toward a baked potato barrow, its tiny iron oven exhaling blessed heat. Potatoes, blackened and blistered, split to reveal white, fluffy hearts that drink butter like it's a sacrament. Even without butter, a pinch of salt turns them into something almost holy. You hover near the chimney, hands open to catch warmth, pretending you're deciding between one potato or two, when the truth is you can't afford half of one. A boy with a news bundle buys a spud and bites in too soon, yelping as steam scalds his lip. He grins anyway, cheeks shining with grease, and for a moment the whole world is distilled to that bite. Hot, simple, filling. Mainstream fact hits you like a potato's soft belly. Baked potato vendors were winter's saving grace for London's poor, roaming the streets with portable ovens, trading pennies for warmth you could eat. You remember sharing one last year, you and a friend breaking it open like communion, each pretending the bigger half belonged to the other. That memory feels warm. The night air snatches it away. You pass a pie stall next, tin cups stacked like little crowns, and a dented ladle resting in something greenish. Parsley liquor, the vendor says, as if you'd asked. He points his ladle at a pale wedge, eel pie, and the scent of pepper and river and gelatin rises to meet you. Jellied eels have fed East End bellies since before you had boots to outgrow. The Thames teemed once, and even now the trade brings in wriggling hope. You picture the pie on your tongue, the wobble of it, the pepper heat, the liquor soaking crust. Historians still argue whether eel pies were primarily poor food or a cross-class London ritual that simply started cheap and stayed beloved. To your hunger, the debate is quaint, and the answer is yes, please. Another aroma slinks in. Meat pies, their lids glazed, their fillings a mystery lineup of dreams and doubts. You know the rumors. There's horse in those, someone always whispers. Cat, another adds, grim as a judge. Officially, horse isn't for people here. Unofficially, a cheap pie can hold many stories. Quirky tidbit. Cat's meat men roam these very streets, selling skewers of horse offcuts for people's beloved pets. Cats and dogs queuing in their way for supper. Some nights, the line looks better fed than you. Whether those offcuts ever wander into human pies, well, historians still argue whether those whispers were slander, urban legend, or the occasional inconvenient truth best swallowed with hot gravy. You'd test the theory if your finances allowed scientific inquiry. Farther along, a coffee stall glows like a friendly moon. Tin urns, stacks of chipped cups, a plate of currant buns that have seen better, softer days. The coffee, often leans heavy on chicory, sometimes on burnt sugar, and occasionally on optimism. Still, it's hot. You watch a costermonger wrap stiff fingers around a cup and come back to life, steam fogging his face until he resembles an apparition with good circulation. You consider begging a sip. Pride clears its throat. You keep walking. When London grew too big for hearths to feed every shift, coffee stalls became the night shift's kitchen. Dockers, drivers, newspapermen, and people like you orbiting for heat. Food has its tricks here, not all of them kind. You've choked on bread that tasted oddly bright until you remembered the stories. Alum to whiten the crumb. A little plaster of Paris if the miller was particularly creative. Milk gets watered. Tea arrives already exhausted from having been steeped for someone richer. Those scandals have stirred more than teacups. The Adulteration Act of 1860 is on the books, and later, the Sale of Food and Drugs Act will bring inspectors with sharper eyes. Historians still argue whether those early laws truly cleaned the cups or simply taught cheaters to cheat smarter. You sip an imaginary brew and decide it's safer not to know. A pea soup vendor rattles by with a tin shaped like a friendly robot, its belly full of thick green comfort. "Halfpenny a basin," he calls, swinging a ladle so expertly he could conduct an orchestra of stomachs. The smell, split peas, a hint of ham, maybe only the ghost of a bone, wraps you up in a memory of a room that was once yours. Spoon, bowl, quiet. You trail the cart for a dozen steps before the shame of wanting without buying makes you veer off. There are temptations stranger than soup. A tripe seller offers white curls like lace, bobbing in broth. A whelk woman heaps shells that taste of the sea if you squint hard enough. A gingerbread man with a tin plate heart, the cart, not the person, taps out a rhythm to lure children with pennies and adults with memories of being children. You pass a stall selling baked apples, the skin split, the cores stuffed with raisin and spice, and you almost cry because that smell feels like a hug you didn't know you missed. The jokes you tell yourself turn softer. If a potato is a hand warmer with a plot twist, you murmur, then a pie is a locked diary. You smile. It's a small rebellion. Your feet take you past a cat's meat man, his tray hung by a strap around his neck. He calls customers by the names of their animals, Molly, Salt and Tip, and doles out skewers with a fondness that surprises you. The cats mew like aristocrats. One woman buys 2 sticks, snaps a bit off with practiced ease, and slips it into her own mouth. You pretend you didn't see. Whether she's sampling or surviving isn't your business. Survival rewrites etiquette. At a stall of stale pies, a girl no older than 12 arranges crusts like they're treasures. She catches your eye and lifts her chin. Bold. "Penny," she says. You spread empty hands. Her chin dips, but she doesn't flinch. She rotates a pie a quarter turn as if that angle might reveal generosity in the next passerby. You wish it would. And still the chestnuts call. You circle back shamelessly to the glow you started with. The vendor pretends not to see you warming your fingers. The gentleman beside you pretends not to notice your sleeves frayed to threads. And you pretend to laugh at nothing in particular to earn your space in the little republic of heat. For 1 minute, 60 heartbeats that tick like distant hooves. You bask. The shells crack like kindling, the coals hum softly, and the city that ignored you becomes a fireplace you're almost allowed to share. When you finally step away, the night feels colder, but you've stolen a pocket of warmth and tucked it behind your ribs. You follow the scent trail onward, past the coffee moon and the parsley stars. promising yourself that tomorrow your hands will earn enough for a potato at least. Hunger argues, hope, absurd thing that it is, interrupts. You walk on, keeping both talking, because silence is the only flavor worse than empty. The farther you wander, the more you realize you're not alone in this endless search for warmth and scraps. London's winter streets are crowded with ghosts who still happen to breathe, each with their own story carved into their rags. Tonight, you're one more shadow in a chorus of shadows. You spot the children first because their voices carry differently, shrill, uncertain, the sound of hunger mixed with play. A little gang scurries out of an alley, bare feet slapping stone, their laughter too sharp for the hour. They're the street Arabs, as newspapers love to call them, abandoned or runaways, sleeping under bridges, making pennies, shining boots, or selling matches. You watch as one boy opens a box with only 2 sticks left, offering them to passers-by who don't look down. He gives up, snaps one himself, and strikes it against the wall. The tiny flame flares, gold and fragile, and for a second all their faces glow with a warmth no one else gives them. Then the wind snuffs it, and they scatter, chasing some other chance. Historians still argue whether London's child poor numbered in the tens of thousands or merely seemed countless, because they were everywhere you turned. You don't need numbers. You need only the image of that boy's hands cupped around a match as if it were the sun. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a man in a threadbare military coat, medals pinned proudly though the cloth beneath them is torn. He mutters apologies in a voice drilled by command, then straightens his shoulders as if back on parade. Soldiers come home to glory in paintings, but reality often leaves them here tramping the same stones as you. He disappears into the fog, still marching. Ahead, you find a woman squatting against a wall, skirts pulled around her, a baby in her arms. The baby doesn't cry, which worries you more than if it did. She rocks it slowly, whispering words you can't catch, voice rasping with cold. Once, you'd heard of baby farming, women paid to mind infants, too many for any arms to hold. Many survived, some didn't. This woman isn't farming anyone. She's simply surviving, and it's hard enough. You look away because staring feels like theft. A young man with ink-stained cuffs passes by, muttering lines of verse to himself. He clutches a slim notebook like it's worth more than food. You recognize the type, the dreamer who thinks poetry can outshout hunger. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's doomed. Historians still argue whether London's slums smothered art or sparked it. Staring at this lad reciting to no audience but the fog, you think maybe both. And then there's the old woman with a patched shawl who sidles up near you at a street corner. She digs through the bin of a pie stall, rescuing crusts thrown away by gentlemen too refined to finish. She sees you watching, gives a crooked smile and says, "Waste not." The words come out warm, like a lesson she's given before. You nod, feeling oddly chastised, as if she were your grandmother instead of another scavenger. You keep moving, passing pockets of life too poor for privacy. Here, 2 boys fight half-heartedly over a crust of bread, swinging weak punches before collapsing in laughter when the bread itself splits between them. There, a man sits with a tin whistle, playing a tune that sounds oddly cheerful, though his cup remains empty. Somewhere, a prostitute leans in a doorway, her eyes hollow, but her voice bright as she calls to a passing sailor. Everyone sells something. Boots, songs, even themselves. You sell only your silence, and it brings no coin. Quirky tidbit floats through your head. Victorian London even had penny sit-ups. Lodging houses where, for the price of a penny, you could sit all night on a bench, sometimes tied to a rope stretched across your lap to keep you upright. No beds, no blankets, just the right to droop in company. You picture yourself among those human scarecrows, nodding forward, jerking awake, nodding again, like an exhausted choir. It's both ridiculous and tempting. The streets keep presenting people as if London wants you to know you're never the only one drowning. You pass two dock workers sprawled under a railway arch, snoring in chorus, boots still on. You skirt a cluster of crossing sweepers, their brooms stacked like spears, waiting for morning's work. You watch a young girl, no more than 10, kneeling to scrub a step with icy water, her face so pale it looks carved from a candle wax. And above them all, the city rumbles, oblivious, chimneys puffing like the world's biggest pipe. You pause by a fire built in a tin drum, surrounded by men whose faces glow orange in the night. They eye you with suspicion, too many mouths already at their warmth. One man gestures you off with a single shake of the head, and you obey. Territory again. The fire might be communal, but the company is not. You walk away, heat fading from your cheek as quickly as it came. What lingers most tonight isn't the hunger or the cold, it's the stories walking past you. Each ragged figure carries a whole volume no one will ever write. A medal pinned to torn cloth, a match flaring against the dark, a lullaby whispered into silence. You realize you're part of this strange fellowship, the unrecorded army of London's winter. Historians still argue whether compassion or cruelty ruled the streets more often. But you've seen both tonight. A shared crust, a shaken head, a smile over crumbs, a shove from a constable. London is a ledger, with kindness on one side, indifference on the other, and the balance changes with every corner you turn. And yet, you keep walking among them. Not alone, never quite alone, even if the company is fleeting, nameless, ragged. Every other wanderer is proof that you're not an aberration, not the only one stitched into the city's cold quilt. The longer you wander, the more you realize it isn't just hunger and cold that stalk you. It's the law itself, embodied in men with lanterns and polished boots. Constables, the so-called guardians of order, step in and out of fog like actors who know the script better than you do. Their oil lamps slice the mist into wedges of light, and you learn to keep to the shadows where their gaze can't pin you. You know the rule by heart. Loitering is suspicious. Sleeping is vagrancy. Begging is criminal. In Victorian London, simply existing without money is enough to make you an outlaw. You remember last week, trying to catch a bit of warmth in a doorway. The constable's lamp caught your face, and his truncheon nudged your ribs. "On your way," he barked, not cruel, but not kind either. You stumbled off, dignity bruised more than bone, wondering how a city this big has no corner where you're allowed to stand still. Historians still argue whether the police were a step toward modern public safety or simply a mechanism to keep the poor invisible. Either way, when you see that blue coat tonight, your instinct is the same. Vanish. You duck down a side alley, boots crunching frost. Behind you, the constable's lantern swings, searching, uninterested in your name, but deeply interested in your absence. You freeze against a wall until the glow fades. Your heart hammers like a drum, absurdly loud for someone who owns nothing worth stealing. Once you're clear, you remember stories of the Black Maria, the police wagon that hauls the unwanted away. Some swear the ride is worse than the destination, its iron bars rattling like a cage for wild beasts. You've never been inside, but you've seen it roll by, its wheels carving icy ruts, and you wonder if warmth behind bars is worth the price of freedom outside. There's a constable ahead now, twirling his baton like a conductor leading a symphony of silence. He eyes a ragged man slumped against a lamppost, lifts him by the collar, and steers him down the street like a sheepdog guiding a stubborn ewe. The man staggers off without protest. The lamp sputters above them, casting a halo over this little performance. Then the constable spots you watching, and you snap your gaze away, walking fast, pretending you've somewhere important to be. Quirky tidbit. Some officers supplemented their wages by moonlighting as watchmen for hire, protecting shops for a fee. If you couldn't pay, your safety depended on chance. Protection wasn't just a service, it was a business model. Tonight, though, no coin jingles in your pockets, so you're on the free plan. One shove, one warning, and no refunds. You slink into Covent Garden, where the market stalls stand deserted for the night. The smell of crushed cabbage and rotting turnips lingers in the cold air. You think about curling under a barrow, but lantern light sweeps the square. A constable makes his rounds, boots ringing sharp against stone. You press yourself into the shadows of a pillar, praying he won't look too closely. Historians still argue whether the constables truly cared about crime or just the appearance of tidiness. After all, thieves, pickpockets, and gangs roamed freely, but heaven forbid you nap under a fruit stall. You smirk bitterly at the irony. Stealing might buy you a night in jail, but resting could buy you the same fate. One is immoral, the other merely inconvenient, but both get punished. The air grows colder with every step, and your thoughts grow sharper with it. You notice how the lanterns reveal steam rising from gratings, and you wonder if those cellars below are warmer. You think about slipping inside one of the half-open doors, blending in as a worker. But constables know that trick. One shout, one hand on your shoulder, and you'd be marched out. Dignity trailing behind like a ragged cloak. Your stomach twists again as you watch a patrol stop at a pie seller's cart. The constable buys one, eats it steaming, gravy dripping down his glove. You can't decide which is worse, the unfairness of it or the tantalizing smell. He wipes his mouth, tosses the crust aside, and strolls off, belly full and truncheon swinging. The crust lands near your foot, already trodden into the muck. You leave it. Pride, though cracked, still holds. The night deepens, and so does the law's shadow. You hear the clatter of another patrol on a side street. They call to each other, voices carrying in the fog. "Clear this way." All quiet here. The words echo like a lullaby, meant only for the rich, assuring them nothing unpleasant lurks too close to their windows. For you, the words mean move faster, keep walking, don't get noticed. Quirky detail floats back into your head. In some parishes, the police were required to rouse sleepers at intervals, not to be kind, but to prevent them from freezing to death on the spot. Imagine that. Your only lifeline is a boot nudging your ribs, reminding you to keep shivering or perish. Historians still argue whether that counted as mercy or merely bureaucracy wearing a human face. You weave through the fog, avoiding lanterns, learning the rhythm of patrols like a dance. Step, pause, slip, vanish. You start to wonder whether the city has grown crueler or you've just grown sharper in noticing. Maybe both. By the time you pause, leaning against a wall to catch your breath, the constables have moved on. Their lamps glow faintly in the distance, swallowed by the night. You close your eyes, but rest doesn't come easy when every moment feels like you're trespassing on a city that never wanted you. Your legs ache, your stomach gnaws, and still you drift on until the faint smell of broth nudges your nose and hope pricks like a match in the fog. You follow it, turning down a side street, and there it is. A queue. Ragged coats, bent backs, shivering children pressed against their mothers, all lined up beneath the shadow of a church. A lantern hangs above the door, glowing weakly against stone, and the words painted on the board promise soup and bread, free to the needy. Your heart tightens. Relief and humiliation in one package, because, yes, it's food, but it's charity. And charity in Victorian London often comes with a sermon spooned in alongside the broth. You take your place at the back, hugging your arms close, letting the shuffle of bodies fold you into the crowd. The man ahead coughs hard enough to double over. The child behind rubs her red nose and sniffles. The whole line smells of damp wool and desperation, but you cling to it like a lifeline. Historians still argue whether these missions truly saved lives or merely saved souls for the church ledger. For you, it doesn't matter tonight. Warm soup is salvation enough. The line inches forward. A woman in a bonnet hands out tracts, pressing them into palms as if paper alone could fill bellies. The man ahead of you mutters under his breath, but he keeps the tract anyway. Paper burns, after all. A clever few use them to wrap scraps, to shield fingers from the too-hot ladle. You know you'll do the same. Inside, the hall smells glorious. Boiling peas, maybe lentils, the faint sting of onions. A hymn echoes from the rafters, sung by volunteers and voices too pure for streets this broken. The sound floats like incense, and you realize the music works its trick. You feel cleaner just for standing there. Quirky tidbit, some missions would even play a little organ as soup was ladled, hoping the tune carried God's message better than any preacher. Whether that saved souls or just made the soup taste less watery, historians still argue. Finally, it's your turn. A ladle dips, rises, and a thin stream of soup splashes into your tin bowl. It's hot, at least, and steam curls up to kiss your cheeks. The bread, hard, crusty, but bread nonetheless, lands beside it. You step aside, clutching both like treasure, and find a corner of the hall. You crouch there, blowing gently, then sip. Salt, warmth, the faintest trace of beans. It's heaven disguised as broth. For one shining moment, your body believes it might live another day. Around you, others slurp and sigh. A boy dips his bread, soaking it until it crumbles into mush, then licks the bowl clean. A woman whispers thanks over each bite, whether to God or the cook you can't tell. The coughing man hacks between sips, but even he looks grateful. Hunger, it turns out, is the most democratic thing in London, but charity is rarely free. After bowls are emptied, a minister climbs a small platform, Bible in hand. His voice is stern, but not unkind. He speaks of salvation, of turning from sin, of Christ as the bread of life. You've heard it before. Sometimes you wonder if soup would still be ladled if you swore the wrong answer. Historians still argue whether missions used food as a tool of conversion or as an honest gesture of compassion. Standing here with a full stomach, you're in no mood to split hairs. The sermon drones on, but you slip away. Bowl returned, stomach buzzing faintly with warmth. Outside, the line still stretches down the street, new faces replacing yours, the same hunger echoed over and over. The lantern flickers above them, the fog curls around their shoulders, and the city pretends not to notice. As you walk, you think of another place, the ragged schools. They teach children letters in exchange for hymns, filling empty minds alongside empty stomachs. You peeked inside once, seen a chalkboard covered in shaky alphabets. Maybe those children will climb out of poverty on the rungs of words, or maybe the rungs will break under the weight. No one knows. Quirky detail surfaces. Sometimes even pubs gave away soup, called penny dinners. Not out of charity, but clever business. Feed them broth, sell them beer, and everyone leaves with a different kind of warmth. Historians still argue whether that was exploitation or ingenuity. You argue with yourself, then decide you wouldn't mind either warmth tonight. The night air slaps you again as soon as you leave the mission, stealing the heat from your belly. Still, for a short while, you feel stronger. Your legs carry you lighter. Your breath doesn't fog quite so fast. Charity might bruise pride, but it stitches life back into limbs. You pause under a gas lamp, watching the glow halo its glass. The soup's aftertaste lingers, onions, salt, maybe even a whisper of meat. You lick your lips, reluctant to lose it. Then your eyes adjust, and you notice the beggar slumped nearby, too sick to stand in line, too weary to ask. You wonder if he'll live till dawn, and whether the minister inside will count him in his sermon numbers. You walk on, charity behind you, survival ahead. Your pockets are still empty, your coat still ragged, your body still freezing, but your stomach hums faintly with warmth, and for a few streets at least, that warmth feels like a secret you carry against the cold. The bells toll midnight. The city doesn't pause. Horses clatter, drunk shout, fog thickens. You step into the noise, another shadow in the endless line of shadows. And though tomorrow you may starve again, tonight you've swallowed proof that survival sometimes comes in a chipped tin bowl. You stagger back into the streets, belly faintly warmed, but the night stretches on without mercy. The bells have long since marked midnight, and now the world enters that eerie in-between, not quite alive, not yet asleep. You need to rest somewhere, anywhere, but the noises of London refuse to let you slip easily into dreams. You curl yourself into a shallow doorway, knees to chest, coat clutched tight, but the city hums around you like a restless animal. Horses clop along the cobbles, iron shoes striking sparks in the dark. Every hoofbeat thuds through your skull like a drum, too loud for silence, too steady for sleep. You mutter under your breath, wishing all horses a long holiday. From the nearest tavern, laughter bursts out, followed by a crash of glass. A group of men tumble into the street, their songs slurred but enthusiastic, words tumbling into each other like drunken dancers. One tries to waltz with a lamppost, another shouts at the moon. You draw deeper into your shadow, hoping their revelry doesn't notice you. In their merriment, you're less a fellow human than a nuisance underfoot. Then come the rats. You hear them before you see them. The quick scurry of claws, the faint squeak as they argue over scraps. They dart in and out of barrels, whiskers twitching, eyes glinting. London's true night watchman, armed not with truncheons, but teeth sharp enough to pierce even leather. Historians still argue whether the plague years had truly ended, but with every rat that brushes past your boot, you suspect London never shook off its oldest lodgers. The cold keeps trying to close your eyes, but the city won't let you. A whistle shrills somewhere, maybe a constable, maybe a thief warning his mates. Footsteps pound past fast and heavy, then fade. You peek out, but the fog swallows everything. The air is alive with hints of danger and survival, indistinguishable in the dark. A dog barks suddenly, sharp enough to jolt you upright. Its growl rumbles from a yard across the way, teeth flashing in a crack of moonlight. Dogs here are half pets, half guards, and they treat wanderers like you as the enemy. You retreat further into your doorway, heart pounding. Sleep feels farther away than ever. Historians still argue whether London nights were louder then than now. Fewer machines, perhaps, but more voices, more hooves, more chaos uncontained by law. Tonight, you're inclined to believe the noise never really stopped. The city is a beast with 1,000 throats, and it bellows without rest. You try closing your eyes again, willing your ears to ignore it, but sounds creep in. A baby wails, thin and pitiful, muffled quickly by some weary mother. Two men argue, fists punctuating words you can't catch. Somewhere closer, water drips endlessly into a gutter like a cruel clock measuring sleepless seconds. Each sound tugs you back to awareness. And then, the bells. St. Paul's tolls one, deep, resonant, rolling across the city like thunder. Other churches answer, chimes overlapping in a cacophony that makes your ribs vibrate. You'd laugh if you weren't so tired. You shift, trying to get comfortable against the stone, but every adjustment makes your bones ache, every new angle just another invitation for cold to sneak in. You rub your hands, blow into them, tuck them under your arms, but they remain stiff, almost foreign. You wonder how many more nights before you no longer feel them at all. Quirky tidbit floats through your mind. In some lodging houses, the cheapest bed wasn't a bed at all, but a rope strung across the room. You'd pay a penny to drape yourself over it, hanging forward like laundry until morning. It sounds ridiculous, but right now, even a rope would feel like heaven. At least ropes don't chatter, bark, or break glass. The city refuses to hush. Another cart rattles by, wheels squealing, cargo clanking, maybe coal, maybe beer barrels. The driver sings under his breath a tune from nowhere you recognize, though you can't place it. You almost hum along, but stop, afraid your voice might draw unwanted attention. You tilt your head back, gaze at the faint smear of stars above. They wink weakly through coal smoke, distant and unsympathetic. Do they see you down here, one speck among millions? Or are you already invisible, swallowed by shadow? The question gnaws more than hunger. At last, your eyelids droop despite the racket. You drift for moments, snatched fragments of half-sleep where horses' hooves morph into thunder. Laughter becomes lullabies. Rats turn into dream creatures chasing you through alleys. But then a shout jolts you awake, or a bottle smashes, or a gust of wind rattles a shutter. Each time you startle, heart racing, breath fogging. Sleep teases, but never settles. So you sit in your doorway, halfway between waking and sleeping, eyes heavy, ears cursed open. The city sings, growls, clatters, and coughs around you, and you endure it. because that's all you can do. Endure until the night itself grows tired. You stagger back into the streets, belly faintly warmed, but the night stretches on without mercy. The bells have long since marked midnight, and now the world enters that eerie in-between. Not quite alive, not yet asleep. You need to rest somewhere, anywhere. But the noises of London refuse to let you slip easily into dreams. You curl yourself into a shallow doorway, knees to chest, coat clutched tight. But the city hums around you like a restless animal. Horses clop along the cobbles, iron shoes striking sparks in the dark. Every hoofbeat thuds through your skull like a drum, too loud for silence, too steady for sleep. You mutter under your breath, wishing all horses a long holiday. From the nearest tavern, laughter bursts out, followed by a crash of glass. A group of men tumble into the street, their songs slurred but enthusiastic, words tumbling into each other like drunken dancers. One tries to waltz with a lamppost, another shouts at the moon. You draw deeper into your shadow, hoping their revelry doesn't notice you. In their merriment, you're less a fellow human than a nuisance underfoot. Then come the rats. You hear them before you see them. The quick scurry of claws, the faint squeak as they argue over scraps. They dart in and out of barrels, whiskers twitching, eyes glinting. London's true night watchman, armed not with truncheons, but teeth sharp enough to pierce even leather. Historians still argue whether the plague years had truly ended, but with every rat that brushes past your boot, you suspect London never shook off its oldest lodgers. The cold keeps trying to close your eyes, but the city won't let you. A whistle shrills somewhere, maybe a constable, maybe a thief warning his mates. Footsteps pound past, fast and heavy, then fade. You peek out, but the fog swallows everything. The air is alive with hints of danger and survival, indistinguishable in the dark. A dog barks suddenly, sharp enough to jolt you upright. Its growl rumbles from a yard across the way, teeth flashing in a crack of moonlight. Dogs here are half pets, half guards, and they treat wanderers like you as the enemy. You retreat further into your doorway, heart pounding. Sleep feels farther away than ever. Historians still argue whether London nights were louder then than now. Fewer machines, perhaps, but more voices, more hooves, more chaos uncontained by law. Tonight, you're inclined to believe the noise never really stopped. The city is a beast with 1,000 throats, and it bellows without rest. You try closing your eyes again, willing your ears to ignore it. But sounds creep in. A baby wails, thin and pitiful, muffled quickly by some weary mother. Two men argue, fists punctuating words you can't catch. Somewhere closer, water drips endlessly into a gutter like a cruel clock measuring sleepless seconds. Each sound tugs you back to awareness. And then, the bells. St. Paul's tolls one, deep, resonant, rolling across the city like thunder. Other churches answer, chimes overlapping in a cacophony that makes your ribs vibrate. You'd laugh if you weren't so tired. You shift, trying to get comfortable against the stone, but every adjustment makes your bones ache. Every new angle, just another invitation for cold to sneak in. You rub your hands, blow into them, tuck them under your arms, but they remain stiff, almost foreign. You wonder how many more nights before you no longer feel them at all. Quirky tidbit floats through your mind. In some lodging houses, the cheapest bed wasn't a bed at all, but a rope strung across the room. You pay a penny to drape yourself over it, hanging forward like laundry until morning. It sounds ridiculous, but right now, even a rope would feel like heaven. At least ropes don't chatter, bark, or break glass. The city refuses to hush. Another cart rattles by, wheels squealing, cargo clanking. Maybe coal, maybe beer barrels. The driver sings under his breath a tune from nowhere you recognize, though you can't place it. You almost hum along, but stop, afraid your voice might draw unwanted attention. You tilt your head back, gaze at the faint smear of stars above. They wink weakly through coal smoke, distant and unsympathetic. Do they see you down here, one speck among millions? Or are you already invisible, swallowed by shadow? The question gnaws more than hunger. At last, your eyelids droop despite the racket. You drift for moments, snatched fragments of half-sleep where horses' hooves morph into thunder, laughter becomes lullabies, rats turn into dream creatures chasing you through alleys. But then a shout jolts you awake, or a bottle smashes, or a gust of wind rattles a shutter. Each time you startle, heart racing, breath fogging. Sleep teases, but never settles. So you sit in your doorway, halfway between waking and sleeping, eyes heavy, ears cursed open. The city sings, growls, clatters, and coughs around you, and you endure it, because that's all you can do. Endure until the night itself grows tired. The cough starts as a tickle, the kind that makes you clear your throat politely as if you're about to order tea you can't afford. Then it digs in, deeper, rougher, dragging up a rasp that burns your chest like you've swallowed a spoonful of cinders. You press a fist to your sternum, ride it out, and taste metal at the back of your tongue. The little soup warmth you carried from the mission evaporates, chased off by a chill that seems to begin inside your lungs. Winter isn't just a temperature here. It's a thief that picks the locks of your ribs. You pull your coat closer, but the sleeves are stiff with old damp, and your fingers, oh, your fingers, have become someone else's, pale and waxy at the tips. That pins and needles prickle surges through them, then fades to a dangerous nothing. Frostbite nibbles first. Chilblains bite back later, itching so fiercely you'll want to rub your skin raw. For now, you flex your hands, shake out your wrists, and breathe steam like a reluctant dragon. The air itself feels treacherous. London's winter breath is a cocktail mixed by a careless bartender, coal smoke, damp river fog, horse reek, and the sour exhale of thousands of tired bodies. You remember an older woman telling you, half kindly, half grim, keep moving, or the cold will take you, and if the cold doesn't, the cough will. She wasn't wrong. Consumptive coughs, the dreaded wasting, live in these alleys like landlords who never miss a rent day. You hear it everywhere now, the dry bark that never ends, the wet rattle that sounds like water sloshing in a cracked bucket. Mainstream fact drifts in with the fog. A few winters back, you overheard coffee stall men praising a doctor who took the handle off a pump and stopped a plague. They meant John Snow and the Broad Street Pump. And whether you can read or not, you remember the headline version. Cholera isn't bad air. It's bad water. Trouble is, you still drink whatever you can find. Water sellers dip their buckets into places you'd rather not imagine, and your tin mug has seen more alleys than kitchens. The city is changing. New brick sewers snake underground, thanks to Bazalgette's grand plan. But pipes don't warm hands, and pipes don't knit a roof over your head. Historians still argue whether it was those sewers, better food, or simple luck that bent the death numbers downward later on. From your doorway, the debate feels like it's happening in a warmer room. You shift your feet and wince. Your toes are tiny dramas unto themselves, white where the blood has retreated, then an alarming blotchy red as you stamp life back in. Somebody once advised you to rub snow on skin to wake it up. You tried that exactly once. Verdict: snow is not a doctor, snow is a prank. Quirky tidbit: plenty of Londoners swear by goose grease and brown paper on the chest for coughs, or onion poultices tucked into stockings at bedtime. You've even seen mustard plasters so fierce they left checkerboard burns like a baker's mark. If pain is proof of cure, Victorian medicine is a raving success. Another cough climbs your throat and shakes you hard enough to blur the lamplight. When it fades, you breathe shallowly, wary of provoking the next fit. You think about the places illness loves best. The rope sleep rooms where bodies hang in rows like damp laundry. The four-penny doss houses with mattresses that wheeze dust and fleas in equal measure. The crowded tenements where 12 breaths share one window. Typhus has a pet name here, jail fever, because lice don't need keys. You scratch absently at your collar, half convinced you hear the tiny infantry marching. A pair of men looms past, shoulders hunched, talking in that low, urgent way illness encourages. "Fever van took her," one says, and the other spits into the gutter. The Metropolitan Asylums Board runs those vans now, boxy, shuttered carriages that carry smallpox or scarlet fever patients away to island-like hospitals on the city's edge. You've watched neighbors stare as the van door shuts, wondering whether the ride is rescue or a quiet goodbye. Historians still argue whether isolating the sick saved more lives than it scared people into hiding symptoms. You tug your coat tighter and make a silent pact with your body. Keep upright. Keep invisible. Your throat burns again, so you risk a sip from your dented tin. The water is cold enough to ache. You don't ask yourself where you filled it. Best not to picture the pump with its iron lip worn smooth by 1,000 desperate mouths. Once, after a cholera scare, a parish man hammered a warning placard above a certain spout. Someone tore it down by morning. Caution is a luxury when thirst is immediate. You shuffle from your doorway and walk because walking is warmth, however cheap and temporary. Each corner offers an illness in miniature, a child's nose rubbed raw, a woman's cheeks rope burned by wind, a man's hacking that wrings him out like laundry. A coffee stall keeper coughs into his sleeve between ladles and swears it's only the smoke. He offers you a sniff of his cure, something sharp in a tiny bottle. Smelling salts, perhaps, or hartshorn, boiled antlers by another name. He winks, says, "Wakes the dead." You decline with a smile. You're already trying hard not to audition for that role. Patent medicines glint from a hawker's tray, labels loud as carnival barkers, lung balsam, pectoral elixir, syrup of squills, and lozenges promising to untangle the stubbornest phlegm. You know the whispers. Some soothe with opium's cozy darkness. Others hide mercury's bite beneath honeyed promises. Godfrey's cordial will quiet a squalling baby and a grown man's conscience both. And Mrs. Winslow's works until it doesn't. Historians still argue whether those bottles did more good by easing pain or more harm by numbing warnings. You weigh a copper you don't have against a night you can't face and keep your hands in your pockets. The fog thickens into that notorious greenish soup. that makes gas lamps look jaundiced. You taste the coal on your tongue and picture your lungs wearing tiny soot waistcoats. Somewhere, a bell rings for a fever ward, or maybe a passing church refuses to mind its own business. You think of the infirmary beds you've seen through half-open doors, rows of iron frames, blankets thin as wafers, nurses moving briskly like the only people in the room allowed to be warm. If you stumbled in coughing, they might tuck you between sheets. They might also shave you, scrub you, and keep you until your cough fades or your pulse does. You hesitate at the imagined threshold, feeling suddenly attached to your dirt. Another shiver rolls through you and settles in your jaw. Your teeth click. You focus on your toes again, the simplest arithmetic of survival. Movement equals heat. You stamp, flex, flex. You blow into your fists and tuck them under your armpits. You hum a tune just to keep your chest moving in rhythm, because stillness is a welcome mat for hypothermia. The city supplies its own medical advice unsolicited. A woman passing by tells you to pin a red flannel square over your heart. Keeps the devil from breathing in. A man swears by raw onion at bedtime. Another recommends gin for the germs, see? You thank them all with the same weary nod. Quirky tidbit, some swear pea soup fog itself is healthy, so thick with food it fills you up. You decide any dinner you can't chew doesn't count. When the cough returns, you lean on a rail and let it rack you clean. When it leaves, you're lightheaded, oddly congratulated by your own persistence. You think, briefly, of the ledger the city keeps in secret, the one that tallies who slept through winter and who didn't. Maybe sanitation works. Maybe sermons do. Maybe survival belongs to stubborn bodies and lucky winds. Historians still argue whether progress looks like pipes, policemen, or prayers. You only know that tonight it looks like you, upright and breathing, counting steps between coughs. A rat skitters over your boot and you don't even bother to flinch. Up the street, a chestnut pan pops and you smile at the memory of its small republic of heat. Somewhere behind you, a mission bell calls the latecomers. Somewhere ahead, a constable's lamp tests the fog. You straighten your spine, pull your coat a fraction higher, and put one foot in front of the other. The cure you can afford is movement. The dose is until dawn, and the side effects include hope in small, ridiculous quantities. You take the medicine anyway. Your cough lingers like an unwelcome companion as you shuffle past shuttered shops and dim lanterns. Hunger creeps back now that the soup's thin warmth has burned itself out. It gnaws at you, crueler than frost, whispering promises about food that isn't yours. You try to ignore it, but every tavern vent exhales roast meat smells. Every bakery window mocks you with phantom loaves. And then you see it, the pawn shop. Its window is barred, the sign creaking on rusty hinges, but the promise is clear. Cash for goods. During daylight, the display cases glitter with pocket watches, rings, even boots not too different from the ones crumbling on your feet. Tonight, the shutters are down, but you know the place will reopen at dawn, ready to devour the last scraps of dignity the poor bring in. You pat your coat. Inside, tucked in a threadbare pocket, is your last possession of worth, a small clasp knife, blade dull, handle worn. It's not much, but it was your father's once, before work and whiskey and the grave pulled him away. You've kept it more as memory than tool. Yet tonight, your stomach asks whether memory is worth more than bread. Historians still argue whether pawn shops were lifelines for the poor or traps that kept them permanently broke. What you know is simple. A man sells his wedding ring for supper, then spends weeks clawing to buy it back, only to pawn it again next month. It's a cycle that eats people whole, one coin at a time. You picture yourself sliding the knife across the counter, watching the pawnbroker squint, weigh it in his hand, and mutter something insulting before offering a pitiful sum. Perhaps enough for a pie, maybe even a cup of coffee and a bit of coal to tuck under your coat. Survival, bought at the cost of a memory. Quirky tidbit drifts in. Some pawnbrokers even accepted locks of hair, selling them to wig makers. Imagine parting with your own crown for a crust of bread, only to see a gentleman strutting down the street wearing what used to keep your skull warm. Historians still argue whether that practice was common or just a scandal repeated in whispers, but the thought alone makes you shudder. You lean against a lamppost, wrestling with yourself. Pride insists you keep the knife. Hunger suggests otherwise. You imagine your father's voice, maybe stern, maybe gentle. Tools are for work, not for pride. But what work waits for you tomorrow? There's no wood to carve, no nets to cut, no use for steel except to feed a pawnshop's hunger. You glance around and notice others facing the same quiet debate. A woman fingers a brooch pinned to her collar, cheap but shiny, probably her last heirloom. A man polishes a battered violin, strings frayed, bow crooked. You wonder if he'll pawn it tomorrow or try playing in the street for coins. The pawn shop becomes a church of desperation, and its congregation is everyone who owns one thing too many. You keep walking, the pawn shop fading into the fog, but the dilemma follows you. Your pockets remain empty. Every cart you pass, every smell of roasting chestnuts, every glimpse of food makes the knife feel heavier, almost glowing in your pocket like it wants to leave. You hold it once, feel the worn grooves of the handle, and tuck it back. Not tonight. Maybe tomorrow, if hunger wins the argument. As you walk, you remember stories of men pawning their Sunday clothes Monday morning, only to redeem them Saturday night so they could appear respectable in church. The pawnbrokers made a living on that cycle. Coins out, coins in, dignity sold and borrowed back like laundry. It was the poor man's credit system, with interest measured not in numbers, but in humiliation. The cold deepens. You spot a figure ahead, huddled in the glow of a street lamp, holding something small and shining. As you draw closer, you see it's a locket. She strokes it with her thumb before slipping it into her pocket with a sigh. Another future customer, another memory soon priced in shillings. You pass without a word, but the look in her eyes is one you recognize. That tug of war between love and hunger. Historians still argue whether pawn shops truly exploited or simply filled a void left by banks that wouldn't lend to the poor. You don't care about the economics. You care about tomorrow's meal. And right now, tomorrow looks like it might depend on a dull knife and a broker's smirk. Quirky detail. Some pawnbrokers, out of habit or superstition, use 3 golden balls as their shop sign, a symbol borrowed from medieval Italy. You imagine them rolling like dice, each spin deciding whether you eat or starve. The game feels rigged, but you'll play if you must. You wander on, trying to let the thought go, but your stomach refuses. Every step feels like the city itself whispering, "Pawn it, pawn it." You shove your hands deeper into your coat, clutching the knife, as if the metal itself can argue back. For now, it wins. For now. The night carries you forward, past more shuttered doors and sleeping windows. The pawn shop fades behind you, but its promise burns bright. Hunger has a price, and memory is always accepted as collateral. You reach another corner, lean against the stone, and close your eyes. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll step through that creaking door. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll trade your past for breakfast. Tonight, you carry both. The weight of your father's knife and the weight of your own empty belly. Neither feels light. You wander on, clutching your coat tight, trying not to think of pawnbrokers or knives or bread. The fog grows heavier, clinging to the lamps until the light feels painted on air. Every corner looks the same. Every alley could be yesterday's. And then, at last, you stumble into something that feels almost like a miracle. A railway arch. The arches stand like stone ribs under the skeleton of London's iron tracks, each one echoing with the rumble of trains above. The walls drip, condensation trickling down like tears, but the space itself offers what the streets won't. A roof. You duck inside, careful not to disturb the shapes already curled in shadows. A cough here, a snore there. The arch has its tenants. They don't look at you and you don't look at them. That's the rule. In places like this, eye contact is an invitation. Silence is safety. Historians still argue whether these railway arches, viaducts, and half-built sheds were London's unspoken shelters or simply accidents of architecture. You know only that right now the arch is a blessing. The wind dies here, caught by a stone, and even the damp air feels warmer than the street. You settle into a corner, wrapping your arms around your knees, and exhale. The ground is hard, littered with straw someone must have dragged in weeks ago. Rats scurry along the edges, whiskers twitching, but you've grown used to them. They're practically roommates by now. You think of other hidden corners you've tried before. Once, you slept behind stacked crates on the docks, waking with a longshoreman's boot in your ribs. Another time, an abandoned shed near Whitechapel held you for 3 nights, until someone barred the door and left you pounding to get out. And there's the classic, under bridges, where the Thames fog wraps around you like a damp blanket and the river whispers promises you don't dare follow. Quirky tidbit floats back. Some of the lucky poor could bed down inside disused omnibus cars left standing in yards until morning. For a penny, you'd share the wooden benches with strangers, heads lolling as if you were passengers on an endless route to nowhere. They called it sleeping rough, but compared to the open street, it was practically first class. The arch rumbles as a train passes overhead, shaking grit from the ceiling. For a moment, you imagine yourself on it, rolling out of London, away from smoke and frost and pawnbrokers. Where would you go? A country lane, maybe, where fires burn in hearths and frost melts into fields instead of sticking to cobbles. You close your eyes and pretend the rumble is your escape, not just noise above your head. But the noise below doesn't fade. Someone coughs again, harsh and wet. Another mutters in his sleep, words too tangled to understand. You shift, trying not to disturb them, but every rustle echoes. It's a strange fellowship, this. Dozens of people sharing a space but never speaking, bound only by need. Historians still argue whether London authorities tolerated these makeshift shelters or turned a blind eye out of convenience. Officially, Rough sleeping was discouraged, sometimes punished, but the arches never emptied. Poverty fills every gap a city leaves behind. Tonight, you're grateful for the gap. The air smells of iron, coal soot, and damp stone. It's not pleasant, but it's dry. Your breath fogs less here, and your fingers sting less when you rub them together. Sleep might come if the rats stay polite and the cold stays merciful. Your eyes drift shut. The ground presses back hard, but exhaustion is heavier. For a few moments, you dream half dreams of trains carrying you away, of cottages glowing with firelight, of bread that never runs out. But then a shout jolts you awake. It comes from outside the arch, a constable's voice, sharp, cutting through the fog. Up, all of you, out! You hear boots scuff, groans of protest, the rustle of bodies rising. Your heart hammers. You stay low, hoping to vanish into the stone. But the beam of a lantern sweeps in, catching the edges of straw and the gleam of rat eyes. You squeeze tighter into your corner. Quirky detail. Some constables claimed they cleared arches for safety, saying fires could start, disease could spread. Others admitted bluntly that landlords complained about the sight of ragged bodies under bridges. Historians still argue which excuse rang truer. From your corner, neither matters. Both end with you back in the street. The footsteps draw nearer. A boot nudges a man near you, sending him stumbling out. Another curses under his breath as he's pushed. Then the light flickers your way. You squint, raising a hand against it, and the constable scowls. Up. His voice is final. You nod, rising slowly, legs stiff, heart sinking. Outside again, the fog feels colder, the wind sharper. You look back once at the arch, now emptied, its shadows echoing without you. Shelter lasts only as long as it's ignored. Tonight, it wasn't. And so, once more, you step into the endless night. Searching again. The city gives corners, then takes them back, as if testing how much persistence you have left. The answer, for now, is enough to keep walking. You keep walking because the night keeps asking you to. But hunger walks faster. Tugging at your sleeve like a rude acquaintance, it whispers solutions you've laughed at in gentler weather. Not the workhouse. Pride kicked that can down the road. Not the pawn shop. Your father's knife still presses against your ribs like a reminder, which leaves the thought you've tried not to think. Crime. The word tastes metallic, like the cough you can't shake. You roll it around anyway because empty stomachs draft bad plans. Crowds, even at this hour, make dangerous ideas look easy. A sailor sways out of a tavern with a silver watch chain looping like moonlight across his waistcoat. He tilts his head to sing at a gas lamp. The chain winks. Your fingers tingle. A muscle memory that isn't yours. You've watched nimble hands do it. The bump, the apology, the nimble pinch at the clasp. And then gone, swallowed by fog, traded to a fence before dawn. You can almost feel the weight of that watch in your palm, then 2 pies in your other hand, then a night under a roof. Almost. You drift closer, testing the air around him, but so do other shadows. One brushes your shoulder, a lad with a scar and eyes that don't smile. "Leave it," he breathes, not unkind, just factual. There's territory in crime, the way there's territory around fires. You slide back into the darkness, suddenly certain you don't belong to that tribe. There are easier sins than watches. A baker's window, cracked a finger's width, bleeds warmth into the street. 3 loaves sit cooling, their crusts fissured into maps of countries you'll never see. You could slip a hand in, quick as a rat, and be gone. A loaf is not a watch. A loaf can be forgiven by a soft-hearted magistrate, so you tell yourself, though you've heard otherwise. People have been whipped by winter and sentenced by bread. Still, you stare long enough to memorize the shine. Mainstream fact elbows in like a constable. By mid-century, transportation to Australia is wheezing to its last breath. The final ship will sail in 1868, and local prisons have taken the burden. No more exile across oceans for pinching a handkerchief. Now it's months. With hard labor under a British sky you can't outrun. Pentonville, Cold Bath Fields, Clerkenwell, names that bite the cold air. Hard labor, hard fare, hard bed, the reformers brag, as if advertising an inn for people who hate comfort. Historians still argue whether those prisons deterred thieves or simply turned hungry people into hardened ones. You've only got your pulse to consult, thudding fast at the thought of a tread wheel. You've heard it described by men who came out with hollow eyes, an everlasting staircase inside a brick drum, steps marching under your feet in a circle that goes nowhere. Climb or fall. Those are your choices. The treadwheel grinds grain in some places, pumps water in others, and in a few, it does nothing but break men quietly. Quirky tidbit, there's also the hand crank fixed in a box, a petty torture that demands a set number of turns each day. Warders can tighten a screw to make it harder, that screw giving prison officers the nickname that stuck. The man telling you that grinned thinly. They keep you busy, so the devil can't claim overtime. You shuffle away from the baker's window, hands in pockets, because you can't face a future measured in turns of a crank. But the arithmetic of cold is relentless. Coal heaps by the street temp, too. Stray lumps fall from carts, and gleaning is a poor man's sport. Quick fingers can scoop warmth into a pocket without a sermon attached. You try once, crouching as if to retie a lace you don't have, and your hand closes on a chunk the size of a fist. You're up again, walking, heart banging louder than St. Paul's, expecting a shout, a hand, a blow. None comes. The coal is yours. You laugh, soft, disbelieving, and tuck it under your coat like a contraband son. A man in a tattered top hat clocks your prize and tips the brim, envy plain. He sidles near, voice low. If you're set on warming yourself behind bars, there's easier routes. He nods toward a shop shutter. Panes thin, grab and run. You shake your head. He shrugs, already elsewhere in his mind, where glass is sugar and risk is spice. You wonder what his calculus looks like. Maybe he's right. Maybe prison is just the workhouse with guaranteed heat and no sermons about your soul. But you've seen prison too, the separate system, where men sit alone in cells like hermits in a hive, faces hidden under cloth masks in chapel, so even prayer is solitary. Silence sounds noble until it's the only voice you're allowed. You turn down a lane that smells of rope and tar. Sailors' shops, closed now, except for a low door spilling candlelight. A fence, maybe, or a pawnbroker less fussy about provenance. Men slip in quick and slip out quicker. You hesitate and keep going. Things have a way of owning you back once you hand them to a man behind a counter. On the corner, a little drama plays without asking your consent as audience. A girl no older than 12 lifts a gentleman's handkerchief with the grace of a cat. It disappears into her sleeve, quicksilver magic, and she slides away before the gentleman notices his nose's future is compromised. A woman, her teacher perhaps, peels off from a doorway and follows at a distance. The pair vanish into a rookery of alleys, and you exhale. Historians still argue whether there ever was a true criminal class, a race apart raised for theft, or whether the phrase was just a respectable fear wearing a monocle. Watching that girl's skill, you see poverty breeding talent it never asked for. There's a police court not far from here. Thames, Worship Street, take your pick, where the morning's entertainment is men like you explaining why they slept, stole, or swore. The magistrate's eyebrows do most of the talking. 3 months, the clerk says, and the treadwheel gets another pair of legs. The certainty of a bed, the certainty of a bowl, the certainty of a punishment that erases the thought you had. Was the warmth worth it? You pull your coat tighter and decide you prefer uncertainty tonight, ragged as it is. Your cough returns, lesser now that you're moving, and you take inventory. One piece of coal issuing small imaginary rays. One dull knife still yours. One conscience not yet pawned to the devil of immediacy. You allow yourself a grin at the pompous phrasing. The city hasn't starved your sense of theater entirely. A fiddle starts up near Drury Lane, a thin tune trying to charm coins from cold fists. A small knot forms. Laughers, lovers, lingerers. Crowds like that are pickpockets, harvest festivals, all head turns and open mouths. You feel the old itch again, the closeness, the noise, the way objects loosen in the presence of melody. You edge in, not as thief, but as human, letting the bow saw through you. The player's case holds 3 coins and a button. You toss the button back in, and he nods as if you've paid in gold. Music makes even bartering nonsense feel like grace. If you were caught tonight, you think, it wouldn't just be cold and cough you'd be sentenced for. It would be the arrogance of thinking you could rewrite your place in this city by closing your fingers around someone else's luck. There's a defiance in that thought that almost warms you. But there's dignity in resisting it too. Which will history remember? Historians still argue whether the poor in these streets were saints who refused evil or sinners forced to borrow it. You make your own line in the ledger, not tonight. You pass a watchman dozing on his stool, chin to chest, key ring heavy at his belt. You keep your eyes gentle and your hands visible, and he does not wake. A cat darts across your path, and you half bow, as if paying respects to a colleague in night employment. The fog hangs lower, not yet the choking pea soup of legend, just a shawl the city throws over its shoulders. You adjust your pace to match it, softer steps, quieter choices. The baker's window reappears like a test paper set down twice. The loaves have been moved further back now, as if the shop itself sensed you. You smile at the paranoia of bread and tip your cap to no one. Then you turn away, still hungry, still cold, but oddly lighter, like you've declined a heavy package. Your stomach complains. Your feet approve. You listen to your feet. By the time you reach the next corner, you've counted 3 constables, 2 opportunities, and 1 small miracle wrapped in your coat. Coal is not virtue, but it's also not prison. You huddle against a wall and let your hand rest on the warmest lie you've ever told your ribs. Dawn is hours off. Temptation will come again. But for this stretch of night, you've chosen to walk the thin line between starvation and a sentence. It wobbles. You wobble. You keep it anyway. The coal lump tucked under your coat feels like treasure, though it's losing its chill-blocking magic with every step. You wander until the fog grows so thick it swallows even the lamps. Londoners call it pea soup for a reason, though tonight it's less soup and more porridge. Dense, clinging, yellow-green, tasting faintly of coal dust on your tongue. Your boots scrape along cobbles you can't see, and the air presses against your face like damp wool. The fog has moods. Sometimes it feels like a muffler wrapped snug around the city. Tonight, it's a shroud. The glow of a lamp becomes a pale smudge, blurred as though smeared with greasy fingers. People appear and vanish without warning. One moment, a shape at your side, the next, gone as if you dreamed them. Historians still argue whether these fogs were natural quirks of the Thames and coal smoke, or man-made disasters from endless chimneys. You don't need the debate. You can feel the grime coating your teeth. Somewhere nearby, a carriage clatters, then a shriek, the driver cursing as the horse shies from what it can't see. The wheels scrape stone, then silence. You can picture the scene. Men fumbling with reins, horse eyes rolling white, all of them blind in this ghost soup. Even your own steps feel uncertain, like you might fall into a pit that wasn't there yesterday. You pass a man holding a lantern low to the ground. The glow catches his boots, nothing else, his upper body eaten by fog. He doesn't look up, doesn't speak, just keeps sweeping the beam side to side as though scanning for dropped coins. You realize he's guiding himself, not others. For a moment, you follow behind, grateful for the moving circle of light. When he turns suddenly down an alley, the glow vanishes. You're alone again. Quirky tidbit. Londoners used to joke you could slice the fog and serve it with mustard. Punch magazine published cartoons of men cutting chunks to carry home for dinner. It would be funny if your throat didn't burn every time you inhaled. You cough into your sleeve, imagining yourself choking on a meal the city forced down your throat. The fog muffles noise oddly. A street singer's voice floats past, warped and directionless. You can't tell if he's 5 feet away or half a street down. Then laughter bursts close to your ear, so sudden you spin. But the figures are already dissolving into the mist. Your skin prickles. It feels less like weather and more like the city itself has decided to lean close and whisper. Historians still argue whether fog bred more crime or just made it easier to get away with. Tonight, you're convinced it's both. Out of nowhere, a figure bumps your shoulder hard. You whirl, clutching at your coat pocket, half expecting your coal to vanish. The shape mutters something, drunk probably, and stumbles away. You check your knife, still there. The relief is sharp enough to sting. Your ears become your eyes. You catch the rhythmic clop of hooves, then the slap of boots running fast. Somewhere metal crashes, echoing like a bell in a jar. You freeze, pressing yourself against a wall, unsure if the danger is 2 feet or 20 away. The fog hides as much as it protects. It makes crime everyone's neighbor. You keep walking, slower now, hands out to brush the damp stone for bearings. A lamppost emerges like a skeleton, gas flame inside flickering, glow smothered into a faint halo. Drops of moisture cling to the metal, sliding down like sweat. You press a hand against it just to feel something solid in this sea of vapor. Cold, but reassuring. A dog barks suddenly, close, sharp. You can't see it. Only the sound circling you echoed weirdly by the fog. For a moment, you picture glowing eyes staring, waiting. Then it fades, leaving your heart hammering. The fog plays tricks with light. Ahead, two glows hover side by side. They could be lamps. They could be eyes. You hesitate until a figure shuffles between them, revealing the poles. Just lamps, not demons. At least, not the supernatural kind. Quirky detail drifts up. In these fogs, link boys used to earn pennies guiding the wealthy with torches, leading them from door to door like human lighthouses. By the 1860s, they're mostly gone, replaced by gas lamps. But on nights like this, you'd trade your last button for one. Instead, you grope forward like a blind man, hoping your instincts are worth more than pennies. Somewhere in the murk, voices rise, men arguing about money, about cards, about honor maybe. You can't see them, only their words bouncing off fog walls. Then a sharp cry, then silence. You freeze back, pressed to brick, every nerve screaming. Was it a fight? A mugging? Worse? The silence that follows is heavier than the noise. You wait, breath held, until the city resumes its ordinary coughs and clatters. Historians still argue whether Jack the Ripper's later legend was fueled as much by fog as by knives. You believe it. Mist makes monsters easy to imagine and harder to disprove. You turn down another lane, guided by the faint memory of its layout. The fog swallows even your confidence. Your boots splash into a puddle deeper than expected, soaking your toes. You curse softly, teeth chattering, cold and damp. London's signature dish. A figure emerges suddenly, an old woman with a bundle of sticks on her back, face hidden by a shawl. She mutters as she passes, words smudged into nonsense by the fog. Her shape dissolves within 5 steps. You wonder if she was ever real. You stop, finally, pressed against a wall, waiting for your heartbeat to slow. The fog presses close, damp on your lashes, dripping from your nose. For a moment, you imagine it solid. Imagine drowning, standing up. Your chest tightens until you force yourself to breathe. One inhale, one exhale, still alive. And then you hear it, a train whistle, distant, mournful. The rails above must be close. The sound cuts through the fog, sharp as a blade, reminding you the world beyond these streets still exists. For a moment, you let that sound be your anchor, a promise that even if you can't see tomorrow, it's still there, waiting. You push yourself off the wall and keep moving, one hand on the stone, one foot in front of the other. The fog thickens, then thins, then thickens again. You walk on anyway, because that's all you can do. Walk, breathe, and trust the city not to swallow you whole. The fog clings to you, but exhaustion finally starts to weigh heavier. Each step feels slower, heavier, like boots filled with stones. The night has battered you with cold, hunger, noise, and shadows, but now a different tide pulls. Sleep. You stumble past a row of shuttered shops, past a man hawking matches to nobody at all, past a drunk curled against a barrel who snores like a saw. And then, almost against your will, your mind drifts sideways into a world softer than stone. You imagine a country lane, the kind your grandmother once described, hedgerows heavy with frost, a sky pale but honest, the smell of hay, even in winter. You picture cottages with smoke curling out of chimneys, a smell of soup drifting from kitchen windows that don't slam in your face. You see a bed, a bed, stuffed with straw, maybe even feathers if your dream feels generous. A quilt so heavy it pins you down, so warm it makes the cold outside an old joke. Your eyelids flutter, your body slouches against a wall, knees bent, arms wrapped around yourself, but in your mind, you're stretched out on that bed, sighing as though you'd just eaten a full roast with potatoes and gravy. The line between street and dream blurs. The stones under you soften into straw. The whistle of the wind outside becomes the crackle of a fire. The cough in your chest transforms into the purr of a cat curled at your feet. Historians still argue whether dreams kept the poor alive, whether imagination is a survival tool or just a cruel reminder of what can't be had. Tonight, you lean toward survival. Without dreams, your bones would have broken hours ago. Quirky tidbit. Some paupers swore by placing a potato under the pillow as a charm against nightmares. You chuckle softly at the idea. What nightmares could outmatch the waking life you've already endured? Still, if you had a potato, you'd eat it first and hope the dreams behaved themselves. The fog wraps tighter, and in its muffled embrace, you let yourself wander further from the stones. You picture yourself in fields not yet blackened by coal smoke, where frost glitters like silver instead of soot. You hear birds singing, not crows scavenging, but larks lifting songs into the morning. Your hands are warm in this world, not cracked and bleeding, but steady, holding a mug of milk warmed on the stove. You sip, and your throat doesn't burn. The fantasy stretches. You imagine friends waiting by the fire, faces you half remember, maybe invented, maybe real. Someone laughs at a story you tell, and for once the laughter doesn't sting. Someone else sets another log on the fire, and the flames climb, promising there's no shortage tonight. You lean back, belly full, chest light, pride intact. But then, even in dreams, London intrudes. The whistle of a constable's patrol seeps into the cottage walls. The cough of another wanderer filters under the door. You squeeze your eyes tighter, fighting to keep the cottage whole. But the street leaks through. You realize your body is still here, cheek pressed to damp stone, coal lump slipping from your coat, breath fogging into the night. Still, the dream clings stubbornly. You let it, because it's better than staring at fog and rats, better than tallying coins you don't have or imagining pawnbrokers sneering at your knife, better than remembering workhouse rules or tread wheels or sermons ladled out with soup. Your head droops. For a moment, you slip under fully. In that sliver of sleep, you're elsewhere entirely. A meadow in summer, grass tall, bees droning lazy in the air. You're barefoot, and the ground is soft, warm. You run, not from hunger or patrols, but simply because you can. The sun shines, heavy and golden, and no fog rises to steal it. Historians still argue whether the poor dreamed of riches or simply of rest. You know the answer. Rest is the greatest wealth of all. Rich men chase coins into coffins. Poor men chase a nap that doesn't come with frostbite. Tonight, you join the latter, greedy for an hour where no one shoves you awake. Quirky detail flickers through. Some said dreaming of bread was an omen of actual food, while dreaming of teeth fallen out meant sickness. You grin at the absurdity. You've dreamt of both and woken hungry and ill. Superstition feeds no one, but it does give you something to laugh about later. You stir awake briefly, shivering as damp soaks back into your bones. The dream fades, but doesn't vanish. You cling to its outline, dragging its cottage walls around you like an imaginary quilt. The stones are still hard, the fog still choking, but the dream makes them tolerable. It is, in its way, a drug, one free and harmless, unless you mistake it for reality too long. Your head sinks lower, eyes close, body slackens. The city fades for a blessed while. Dreamland becomes your only escape hatch, the one refuge London can't patrol. Tonight, imagination is your only blanket, and you clutch it tight. Gray light presses at your eyelids until the dream cottage thins to a shape made of breath, and the stones under your cheek confess themselves again. Your neck is kinked, one hip numb. The cold lump has slid to your ribs like a polite but insistent lodger. You blink grit from your lashes. Morning sneaks into London by degrees. First the hush shifts, then the colors soften from tar black to damp slate, and finally the city clears its throat for another day. You survived the night. That's the first miracle. The second is smaller. Your fingers still move when you ask them to. You push yourself upright, performing that slow inventory only the poor perfect. 10 toes complaining, 2 knees grinding, lungs coughing, but not quitting. Your breath smears the air in thinner clouds now. The fog loosens its grip and lets you see the world in slices. Lamp posts wearing beads of water, shop signs crusted with frost, a cat stretching like it owns the hour. Somewhere, a lamplighter in a long coat snuffs the last gas flames with practiced grace. In another street, a knocker-up taps windows with a long pole, rousing night shift men to day shift lives. Quirky tidbit, yes, but an honest trade. For a few pence a week, someone sells you sunrise, one tap at a time. Your stomach announces itself with a theatrical rumble. You smile despite it. If hunger is loud, life is still present. A chestnut husk from last night sits in the gutter like a medal from a war you didn't win. The mission door where you queued for soup remains shut for now, but the coffee stall 2 corners down sends up steam like a signal fire. You drift that way, not for a cup, pockets remain eloquently empty, but for heat that doesn't ask questions. The stall holder nods as if you've paid. He's seen enough faces like yours to understand that warmth can be alone. London choreographs its mornings with old steps. Costermongers trundle barrows out. Apples blushed from long storage, onions tangled like hair, watercress bunched with string. Crossing sweepers claim their pitches, brooms poised to earn halfpennies from boots that dislike mud. Newspaper boys rehearse headlines like actors. You slip into this tide, moving because stillness invites concern you can't afford. The cold nugget warms your palm through the coat, a private sun small but stubborn. Mainstream fact wears its workman's boots at the docks. Men gather at the gates for the call-on, caps in hand, backs already bowed by habit. Foremen scan faces and pick a few with a jab of the finger, sending the chosen to unload timber or guano or cotton, while the rest swallow their disappointment and pretend it's breakfast. Casual labor means every dawn is an audition. You've stood there before, knuckle raw, hoping your eyes look useful. Historians still argue whether that system was efficient necessity or deliberate leverage, a way to keep wages hungry by keeping men hungrier. You only know that your name wasn't called often enough to make rent, and never enough to sleep easy. You watch the chosen file in, then turn away before envy curdles into something uglier. A rag-and-bone man comes clopping by behind an exhausted nag, calling rags, bones, bottles, like an incantation that turns trash into coin. You fall in beside him for half a street, trading breath clouds like comrades. He shows you a cracked blue bottle with pride. To him, it gleams like a sapphire. He offers you a ride on the cart's tailboard. You decline. Today, your dignity insists on shoes to ground, even if the soles argue otherwise. The pawn shop's shutters rattle up with a sound like teeth chattering. You stop without meaning to. The 3 golden balls over the door swing slightly, a promise and a warning. Your hand finds your father's knife as if it has its own plans. You weigh it. Your reflection in the dusty glass looks like someone else auditioning for your life. Inside, a man already trades a violin for coins that chink like rain on a tin roof. You imagine granules of bread falling in your mouth, a potato split steaming. Then you imagine the counterwarm smirk, the thin valuation of memory. You step backward once, twice, and the spell breaks. Not this morning. You promise your stomach a better plan before noon. Your stomach files that under fiction. By now the city's morning voice has taken over from its night one. Wheels squeal, doors bang open. A maid throws a pan of gray water that steams on the stones. A knocker-up points his pole at you as if to ask, "Up?" You salute him with 2 fingers and keep moving. In the corner of your eye you notice the arch where you were rousted a few hours ago, empty again, its shadow pretending innocence. A constable passes, unreadable, his lamp dark, his baton now mostly a symbol. He glances at you and away. Daylight makes even the law more lenient. Trouble prefers the fog. You catch yourself counting coins you don't have and switch to counting opportunities you might. A greengrocer carries a sack too big for his shoulders. You offer a hand and he lets you take the worst of the weight for half a block. He grants you a heel of bread in return, casual as weather. You eat it slowly, tongue mapping every bubble, jaw blessing every crumb. If hope were edible, you'd order seconds. But for now, bread is bread, and your body thanks you in the only language it speaks, warmth. The dream of the country lane lingers like the last note of a hymn, but the street's practicalities elbow in. The ragged school opens its door, and children trickle to benches, letters marching across slates like recruits. A woman with a Salvation Army bonnet, new on the scene, hard to miss, speaks kindly to a man who smells of last night. He weeps like the relief is painful. A milk seller waters his pail where he hopes no one sees. A sanitary inspector frowns where he hopes everyone does. You occupy the small square of pavement between them, living proof that policy changes slowly, hunger quickly. Historians still argue whether charity and reform in this age were stepping stones or stopgaps, whether the soup saved souls or merely soothed statistics. Your ledger is simpler. Last night, you didn't freeze. This morning, you ate bread. Right now, your legs still move. If philosophy wants a debate, it can follow you to the next corner. Your cough returns, lighter, a reminder rather than a command. You ease it with the last of your tin water and a stern talk to your lungs. A tram rattles by, sparks bright in the dawn. Workhouse chimneys puff to remind you the option remains if pride ever goes hungry enough. You glance up and down the road. No angels handing out beds, no devils offering contracts. Just London in its usual mood. Busy, indifferent, survivable. The sun, shy as a child, finally punches a hole in the gray and paints a smear of pale gold on a second-floor window. You stand in that light deliberately, like a lizard on a rock, and let it bless your face. Another day begins. You are still here to greet it. Your plan is stitched from thin thread. Find a lift of crates, a handcart to push, a barrow to mind, and your pockets are as empty as the first page of a ledger. Tomorrow may be colder, the fog may be thicker, the constable less patient, the pawn shop more persuasive. But this morning you square your shoulders, tuck the coal deeper, let your fingers brush the knife for courage rather than sail, and step into the moving city. You survive the night. You decide quietly but firmly to survive the day. The night has bruised you, but dawn arrives like a stubborn creditor, collecting attention whether you have it to give or not. You drift with the current of feet toward the market, the smell of produce and smoke announcing it before the stalls come into view. Covent Garden is already shaking off the frost. Canvas awnings creak as men tug them open. Barrows squeak under loads of vegetables, and shouts pierce the gray morning like church bells trying to sell cabbages. The first thing that hits you is smell. Sharp onions, damp turnip tops, oranges so bright they look imported straight from the sun. Against the stale fog of last night, these smells are almost violent. You close your eyes for a moment and pretend you've walked into a banquet, not a maze of mud. Stalls bloom in every corner, pyramids of apples, spotted but stubbornly cheerful, piles of carrots with green hair sticking up like ragged crowns, great mounds of potatoes, some so floury you can almost taste the butter you don't have, and fish, always fish, gleaming on beds of melting ice, their eyes as surprised as yours to find themselves here. You pause, hypnotized by the scales catching the new daylight like coins you'll never see. A costermonger notices your gaze and sings out his pitch. Fine mackerel, 2 for a penny. You smile faintly, shake your head, and keep moving. He shrugs, already turning to the next potential buyer. Historians still argue whether these bustling markets truly provided cheap food for the poor or simply displayed plenty you could never quite afford. Standing here, the answer seems obvious. The stalls are a theater, and you're the seatless audience watching other people eat. The ground is slick with cabbage leaves, broken shells, squashed fruit. Rats dart openly, bold as customers. A boy sweeps a pile of bruised pears into a basket. You linger, wondering if one might roll astray. He glares, daring you. You shuffle on. Pride and hunger are still arm wrestling inside you, and it's not clear which side is winning. Quirky tidbit. Oranges were luxury once, but by the mid-1800s, thanks to imports, even the poor might get one at Christmas. Children clutched them like golden globes, sniffing more than eating. You smile at the memory of last Christmas when a stranger pressed one into your palm at a mission hall. You peeled it slow, sucking every drop of juice as if it were sunshine distilled. Even now, the ghost of that flavor haunts you. The market roars around you. Women cry bargains, men bark laughter, costers clash over turf. A donkey brays as if to outshout them all. The chaos is almost musical, almost joyful, but underneath it hums the hard rhythm of survival. Every shout is a plea, every coin the difference between supper and empty pots. You watch a woman cradle a sack of potatoes like a baby. You watch a child bite into a raw carrot, unwashed, as if it were candy. Historians still argue whether London markets empowered costermongers to climb out of poverty or trapped them in eternal grind. The truth feels like both, woven together, A barrow today, hunger tomorrow, then back to the barrow again. You edge toward a stall selling fried fish. The smell slaps you. Oil, vinegar, salt, sizzling batter. A man hands over a halfpenny, walks away with a greasy scrap of heaven balanced on paper. You lean too close, and the vendor shoos you with a flick of his wrist. No coins, no crumbs. You laugh, thin but genuine, at the predictability. But not everyone pushes you off. A girl about your age winks as she passes, slipping you a crust torn from her loaf. "Too hard for me, teeth?" she says with a grin. You nod thanks, chew slowly, savoring every grain. The market can be cruel, but sometimes kindness sneaks in disguised as waste. A fiddler sets up at the corner, bow scraping, hat open for coins. His tune rises above the cries, threading through the stalls like a mischievous spirit. Children clap, women sway while bargaining. Even the donkeys seem to bray in rhythm. You find yourself tapping a boot. Music doesn't fill a stomach, but it fills something else. Something you'd forgotten was hungry too. Quirky detail floats by. Some scholars note how markets weren't just for trade, but gossip, courtship, even politics. News here spreads faster than any paper. A costermonger declares the price of turnips has doubled. A boy shouts rumors of a royal parade. A woman mutters that cholera's back in the East End. Truth or fiction hardly matters. The market believes it all. You move through the press, letting the voices wash over you like a tide. At one stall, men argue over weights. Was that measure truly a pound or shaved thin? At another, a woman insists her goose was alive yesterday, fresher than any rivals. You smile, thinking of how survival in London always involves performance. Everyone is acting. The vendor as generous, the buyer as shrewd, the wanderer as if he belongs, and you do belong in your way. You may not buy, but you witness. You breathe in the smells, hear the bargaining, watch the spectacle. That counts for something. The market is life condensed, messy, loud, unfair, but undeniably alive. You lean against a post, gnawing the last of the crust, and feel your eyelids sag. For a moment, you imagine lying down right there, letting the noise cradle you, but the bustle never allows stillness. A barrow jostles past, a woman brushes your sleeve, a constable eyes you from across the crowd. Rest will have to wait. The market keeps roaring, the sun climbs faintly, and your day begins not with a meal, but with the illusion of one, scents and scraps and noise enough to trick the body into believing it might last. For now, that's enough. Your body, half fed by the crust and the fumes of the market, drifts now toward another ritual of the morning, the labor lines. They gather at the edge of the docks, outside warehouses, beside the looming gates of factories. The crowd isn't loud like the market. It's hushed, restless, charged with nerves. Men shift from foot to foot, shoulders hunched against the cold, eyes fixed on the doors that will soon swing open. This is the audition stage of the poor. No scripts, no costumes, just hands, backs, and hunger. You find your place among them, another figure in the row. The air reeks of damp wool, pipe smoke, and anticipation. One man coughs into his sleeve, another stamps his feet for warmth. Nobody talks much. Talking might admit fear, and fear is already clamped tight in every throat. When the foreman finally appears, the crowd straightens as one. He's got a clipboard, a pencil stub, and a look that's all arithmetic. He doesn't see men, he sees numbers. Strong backs, tired faces, maybe liabilities. He points, brusque. You, Not you, you. Each word is a gavel strike. Every point means bread for a family. Every omission means another day of gnawing bellies. You lean forward unconsciously, willing his finger toward you. It skips past, lands on the man beside you. Relief floods the chosen. Disappointment slams the rest. Your chest hollows, but you keep your face neutral. Desperation isn't professional. Historians still argue whether casual labor lines kept men disciplined, always sharp, always desperate, or whether they destroyed communities by turning comrades into competitors. Standing here, you know it's both. The line is of family until the finger points, then it's every man for himself. The foreman calls again, plucking from the line like a child picking sweets. A boy barely 15 gets tapped, shoulders too narrow for the sacks he'll have to lift. You wince for him, but envy him all the same. Hunger has no room for fairness. Quirky tidbit. Some docks were known for the call-on being so chaotic that men fought with elbows and fists just to stand where the foreman could see them. The unlucky ones never got near the front, no matter how strong. Some say fights were so regular, the crowd looked more like a brawl than a queue. You shift your position, closer now, hoping visibility might count for something if the list isn't full yet. But the finger points elsewhere. More men shuffle forward, each chosen one peeling off with a glance of triumph or maybe apology. Work today means aching arms, stiff backs, maybe injury, but also food. You'd trade your ribs for that ache. Instead, you stand still, rehearsing a smile you can't quite manage. One man behind you mutters, "Waste of time." Another sighs, "Better luck at Billingsgate." The line thins as hope drains. You remain waiting for a miracle late edition. It doesn't come. The foreman closes his book, waves his arm, and the gate swings shut with the finality of a coffin lid. The crowd disperses in silence, boots dragging, faces blank. A few men grumble, others spit into the dirt. The chosen are already hefting sacks, vanishing into the warehouse belly. You turn away, spine aching as if you'd worked without pay. Historians still argue whether labor markets like these fueled industrial progress or wasted human potential. Looking at the lines of hollow faces, you suspect the latter. Progress for the city, perhaps, but not for the man whose belly stays empty. You drift toward another gathering, smaller, outside a construction site. Timber frames jut into the sky, scaffolds dripping with frost. The foreman there is younger, sharper-eyed. He points too, quicker, less patient. You don't even get close before he barks, "Full!" The men groan, scattering. One curses under his breath. You keep walking, hands deep in pockets, shoulders curled. Your stomach grumbles again, a heckler that refuses to leave the theater. You pat it absently, as if calming a child. No work today means no coins. No coins means no pie, no potato, no lodging. The arithmetic of poverty is always subtraction. Quirky detail. Some men carried small props to catch the foreman's eye. A polished shovel, a length of rope, even a forged reference letter. Anything to stand out. You got nothing but your coat and a cough. Perhaps you should sell the cough as proof of working lungs. You chuckle dryly at the absurdity. The line disperses into alleys, each man peeling off toward his own strategy, some to pawn shops, some to pubs, some to crime. You follow the tide until you're left alone again, the fog closing around you like it wants you back. The city shrugs at your failure. Your feet take you to the edge of the river. Barges creak, ropes strain, Gulls scream overhead. Men already labor there, hauling crates, swearing, sweating, even in the cold. You lean on a rail, envy sharpening your ribs. Work looks brutal, but brutality feeds better than pity. Historians still argue whether casual hiring kept men flexible or trapped them in cycles of uncertainty. You decide the argument is pointless. For you today, the answer is simple. It left you hungry. You turn from the docks, shoulders hunched, lungs burning. No work today, tomorrow maybe. The line will form again, and you'll join it again, because hope, however thin, is still the only employer who never fires you. The crowd of failed workers thins behind you, and your steps draw you into narrower alleys where the fog lingers like a tenant who hasn't paid rent. The smell shifts here. Less fish and coal, more damp plaster, overflowing privies, and boiled cabbage leaking through walls. This is where London hides its poor in bulk, the tenements. You slip into one of the sagging doorways, not as an intruder, but as a ghost. The building groans with every breath of wind, stair rails wobble under your palm, and the walls sweat moisture that freezes into slick crystals in the corners. You climb carefully, following voices and the glow of a candle guttering behind a cracked door. Inside, a single room crams 4 lives, or maybe 5, hard to count. A mother stoops over a small stove, coaxing fire from scraps of coal smaller than your thumb. 2 children share a stool, hunched around a crust of bread as if it's a feast. An older man snores in a corner, his cough rattling like a kettle about to boil. The window is nailed shut, glass clouded white with frost. The air is heavy with bodies, thin with oxygen. Mainstream fact: in some East End tenements, it wasn't unusual for 20 or 30 people to share a single room, paying for the right to stand, sit, or lie down in shifts. Here, space is as precious as food. You edge against the wall, suddenly hyper-aware of your own bulk in a room already bursting. Historians still argue whether landlords were villains exploiting desperation or simply businessmen reacting to the flood of migrants chasing work. Either way, the result is the same. Walls thin as paper, floors sagging, privacy non-existent. A baby wails in the next room and is answered instantly by another like some grim duet. Quirky tidbit. Some tenants, unable to afford even a corner, rented space on penny sit-ups. Benches where you paid a coin to sleep sitting upright, heads drooping forward on ropes strung across the room. Imagine dozing while your forehead rests on a communal line, like clothes hanging themselves out to dry. You shiver at the thought, half in horror, half in bitter amusement. The children glance at you, not fearful, just curious. To them, strangers are part of the scenery. Faces come and go, but hunger always stays. One offers you a bite of the crust, but you wave it off, ashamed to take what's already too little. Instead, you crouch, trade them a smile, and whisper a story fragment you once heard. A king disguised as a beggar. They giggle, crumbs scattering like confetti. For a moment, the room brightens. The mother straightens, eyes lined with exhaustion deeper than any wrinkle. She nods, gratitude or simply recognition of another survivor. The stove pops, a spark leaps, and the flame dies down again. She curses softly, then laughs, because sometimes laughter is cheaper than coal. You leave before the walls squeeze tighter, climbing back down the creaking stairs. Outside, the air feels almost clean, though it's still thick with fog. Your lungs draw it in greedily. You glance back at the building, its windows blinking like tired eyes. You know the lives inside will press on, hour by hour, trading space, warmth, and scraps in an economy made entirely of compromise. Historians still argue whether reformers exaggerated these conditions to shock Parliament or whether truth was even worse. You suspect no pamphlet could capture the smell, the sound, the oppressive press of bodies. Words flatten, life swells. Quirky observation. Some philanthropists would tour slums at night, escorted by police, carrying lanterns to see how the poor lived. You chuckled dryly. If they'd stepped into that room, they wouldn't need lanterns. The glow of desperation is bright enough. Your feet crunch over litter, your breath fogs again. A woman passes carrying a bucket that sloshes filth onto her boots. She doesn't even flinch. A boy dashes by with a loaf under his arm, pursued by a shouting vendor. Life here is swift, narrow, relentless. You catch yourself longing, strangely, for the drafty arches you fled last night. At least there, space was your own, even if the constable claimed it by baton. In the tenements, privacy is a myth. Hunger is communal. Misery rented out by the weak. Your stomach growls again, echoing faintly in the alley. You pat it like a sulking pet and keep walking. The tenements fade behind you, swallowed by fog. Ahead lies the river again, and with it another chance at work, another gamble. But the image of that one-room family clings to you. The mother laughing at her dead stove, the children sharing crumbs like treasure. You wonder if survival is easier alone or harder, whether company soothes the hunger or makes it sharper. The city doesn't answer. It only exhales another cloud of smoke, as if to say, on you go. The river pulls you back like an old tune you can't shake. Fog thickens along the wharf, wrapping crates and cranes in gauze. Here the city groans awake in a different rhythm. The deep grunt of men lifting, the creak of wood, the slap of ropes taut against bollards. You follow the sounds and find yourself at the dockside, where labor is heavy, loud, and merciless. Barges nudge against stone quays, unloading sacks that look bigger than the men carrying them. The foremen bark like generals, their voices slicing through gull cries. Lines of workers bend double, spines arching under cargo that could break ribs if dropped. The air stinks of fish, tar, sweat, and cold iron. You stop, watching, the ache in your own back flaring just from sympathy, mainstream fact. The London docks were among the busiest in the world by the mid-19th century, a torrent of trade flowing in. Tea, tobacco, grain, timber, anything the empire could swallow or spit back out. To stand here is to feel the empire's lungs inhaling, but the men who power those lungs are paid by the hour, if at all. You edge closer, tempted to shout for work, though the memory of rejection still stings. A man near you whispers, "Don't bother, already picked." He jerks his chin toward the gate where chosen men file in like condemned soldiers. You sigh, shoulders sagging, but remain to watch. Even denied, the dockside spectacle commands you. Historians still argue whether dock work was a curse, injury-ridden, unreliable, or a prize, since wages could surpass other casual jobs if you got lucky. Watching the men stagger under loads, you decide both might be true. It's fortune's coin toss, and today you didn't even get to flip it. Quirky tidbit. Dockers often tied ropes around their waists, not just to steady loads, but to keep trousers from splitting when bending. Without such ropes, Embarrassment was as likely as injury. You smirk, imagining yourself trussed like a Christmas roast. Trousers safe, but dignity questionable. A commotion erupts. One man slips. A sack of grain bursts open, dust clouding like golden fog. Foremen curse, dockers laugh. A boy scrambles to scoop fallen kernels into a cap. Hunger wastes nothing. You cough, lungs stung by the dry powder, but can't help chuckling at the absurd scramble. Even accidents feed someone. You drift further along, where stevedores hoist timber from ships. The wood gleams with sea salt, slick under bare hands. A man yelps as a beam crushes his boot. Others rush, lifting it free, but the damage is done. He limps away, muttering, already replaced before he's out of sight. The machine of commerce tolerates no pause. You shiver at the thought. Injury means dismissal. Dismissal means hunger. No workers' comp, no safety net, only the pit yawning wider. Historians still argue whether Victorian industry valued human capital or saw men as disposable cogs. Standing here, the argument feels answered in every sack and beam. You linger by a tavern at the water's edge where men spill in after shifts, roaring with drink before noon. Their laughter is ragged, their songs off-key, but the warmth spilling out the door tempts you. You pat your pocket. Empty. No coin, no entry. You press closer anyway, stealing the heat with each open door. Quirky observation. Some dockside pubs allowed workers to pay in kind, trading small portions of wages or even tools for ale. You wonder if you could barter your cough. 2 wheezes for a pint? Not likely. The tide slaps the quay. Cold spray flecking your face. You imagine plunging in, swimming away to warmer shores, but the Thames is filthy, churning with refuse, and even if it weren't, you've no strength for swimming. You settle for imagining the salt tang of faraway seas, a crueler but cleaner cold. Nearby, a preacher bellows to passing dockers, "Repent. Idle hands invite the devil." Most ignore him, too busy with sacks and ropes. One man spits in his direction. You smirk. Dockers may carry empire's goods, but their patience doesn't extend to unsolicited sermons. Historians still argue whether moral crusades at the docks reduced drinking or simply irritated, exhausted men. Judging by the tavern's roar, the latter wins. A gull swoops low, stealing a fish-tail from a crate. Dockers curse, laughing too. You laugh with them, a brief camaraderie despite your outsider status. For a breath, you belong, sharing the dockside's rough humor. But then the gates slam shut again, work hours sealed off from you. You're left with nothing but gull cries and the ache of watching others labor. Your hunger gnaws sharper for having seen food pass hands. Your back throbs in sympathy for a load you never carried. The river keeps flowing, indifferent. Ships arrive, ships depart. Cargo never ceases. You, however, are stagnant. A stone on the bank. You turn away from the docks, shoulders stiff, stomach hollow, lungs filled with fog and flour dust. Work has denied you again, but London never runs out of streets to wander. Ahead lies another corner, another chance, another disappointment waiting politely for you to arrive. You leave the river's iron breath behind and follow a different kind of tide. The thin, eager chant of children reciting letters. It threads through a warren of courts until you find the door. Paint flaking, a Bible verse stenciled above the lintel, and inside the warm racket of 100 small hopes colliding. A volunteer in a faded bonnet looks you up and down. then sideways at your coat, and says, "You may warm yourself if you'll mind your manners." You nod, grateful. In a city that sells warmth by the inch, this is a rare free inch. The room is long and low, beams sweating with old damp, windows filmed with the same coal grime that seasons your lungs. Benches run in rows. Slates gleam like small black mirrors, each clutched by a pair of reddened hands. Chalk dust floats in rays of weak light. An indoor fog gentler than last night's pea soup version. A teacher raps a stick for silence, and a hush ripples outward, imperfect but determined. You take a place at the back wall, halfway inside, halfway ready to bolt. "Ragged school," the sign outside promised, and it is exactly that. Ragged children in ragged clothes and ragged attention spans, stitched together by the stubborn thread of someone's patience. Mainstream fact hums at the edge of this scene. The Ragged School Union formed in 1844, Lord Shaftesbury thundering in Parliament while volunteers scavenged rooms like this from stables and lofts, determined to give the slum child letters, scripture, sometimes soup. By 1870, the Elementary Education Act would begin the march to compulsory schooling. But for now, this is the makeshift bridge between gutters and words. A hymn starts, thin, brave, off-key. You mouth along softly, then realize your voice is not the worst offender and allow a little sound. When the last note wobbles away, the work begins. The master uses the monitorial trick. Older pupils, called monitors, shepherd flocks of younger ones, walking the aisles like miniature generals. A, B, C. The chorus answers with more enthusiasm than accuracy. You feel something loosen in your chest that isn't a cough. A girl at the nearest bench turns her slate toward you, tongue caught between teeth. She's written her name in letters that lean like drunks. You give her a thumbs up. She beams as if you'd handed her an orange. The monitor frowns theatrically and whispers, "Mind the tail on your G's, miss." The tail is duly lengthened until the G looks ready to trip someone. Historians still argue whether these schools were engines of mercy or machines of moral control, whether they lifted children toward futures or pressed them neatly into docile present tense. In practice, it seems to be both. The master alternates letters with verses, spelling with sermons, kindness with discipline, measured in knuckle raps. Every lesson contains the subtext: behave, read, obey, and maybe the world will not eat you whole. A pot simmers at the back, thin stew with a gossip of vegetables. The smell steals your attention the way chestnuts did last night. A woman ladles carefully, a scoop for the weakest, then for the rest. You are neither child nor registered soul. But the bonneted volunteer who lets you in looks at your ribs the way a tailor eyes measurements and silently tips a ladle into a dented tin. You murmur thanks and cradle it. It's not much, but it's hot. Your hands remember what warmth feels like. Quirky tidbit glints from a framed notice. Shoeblack Brigade. Apply for training. You've heard of them, the ragged school's uniformed boys who polish boots at busy corners, hats cocked, boxes slung like accordions. They earn honest pennies and a bit of pride, their blacking shining as bright as their future is rumored to be. There are even penny banks, little savings clubs where coppers sleep until they become something larger. The thought of you in a cap with brush and tin almost makes you laugh. The master delivers an object lesson, setting a potato on the desk. Brown, unremarkable, miraculous. He asks, "Whence comes supper?" Answers erupt, "From God, from the shop, from Mr. Spud." Laughter cracks the solemnity. He traces the potato's path, field to sack to barrow to pot, turning that lump into geography, botany, economy. Your mind backtracks to the baked potato barrow's chimney you haunted, to the dream of a potato under the pillow, warding off nightmares. If it worked, this room would be a palace of sweet sleep. A boy in front of you coughs until he gasps. You pass him your scarf. Threadbare, yes, but it fools a throat into thinking someone cares. He wraps it around like a royal sash and returns to his ABCs. You ask yourself, not for the first time, whether learning to read is armor enough against a winter like this. Historians still argue whether literacy alone rerouted lives or merely taught the poor to read the signs saying, "Keep off." A monitor sidles up with a spare slate and chalk, eyebrow arched. "Can you write your name, sir?" The sir lands with absurd dignity. You take the chalk. Your hands are clumsy, stiff from cold, reluctant from pride, but the chalk squeaks across the surface and leaves behind the shape you've carried silently for years. Not beautifully, not even straight, but there. You exhale as if you'd set down a crate at the docks. Names pin you to the world more kindly than batons do. A boy peeks at your work, impressed. "He can write," he whispers, as if you've twisted a coin from thin air. You grin. Something inside stands taller. The master raps again. The room steadies into a hum, and for 20 minutes time swells, warm and usable. You almost forget your father's knife resting against your ribs like a quiet question. You almost forget the labor line's finger that skipped you. You do forget the constable's lantern long enough to believe the only authority here is the alphabet. Soup reaches you as it cools. You tip the tin, savor onion and barley, the ghost of bone. You thank the ladler. She returns a look that is equal parts mercy and mandate. "Come back this evening," she says, "if the fog worsens." You nod, storing it with other lifelines. The arch under the rails, the mission bell, the coffee stall that loans heat. The hymn returns to close the lesson. Children collect slates, tuck chalk, bundle little hopes into big pockets. The bonneted volunteer retrieves your tin and presses a scrap of bread into your palm as interest. You touch the brim of a hat you don't have and step back into the corridor, where the city's chill waits like a patient creditor. The door closes and leaves you in a hush that tastes of chalk and broth. You pause under the stenciled verse, listening to the muffled scuffle of tiny boots. Shoeblacks to be, letter learners, future dockers with straighter backs. The debate about mercy versus control can stay with the historians. You are content with the evidence in your bones. For 1 hour you were warmer, worded, a little less erased. In a city that often writes you in invisible ink, someone traced you over, darker. Back outside, the light has climbed from pewter to tin. You rub chalk from your fingertips and feel absurdly that you've borrowed a clean inch of yourself from the future. The street resumes its ordinary moods. Vendors calling, wheels complaining, a constable checking doors with daylight leniency. Your cough waits politely and then reminds you it still exists. You pat your chest, tell it you learned your letters, and it can learn patience. Ahead, the day continues its familiar bargain. Work if you can find it, soup if you can earn it, sleep if you can steal it. But the letters march now in your pocket like small, stubborn soldiers, A for arch, B for bread, C for chestnut, a private alphabet of salvations. You set your shoulders, step into the flow, and let the lesson ring in your head the way chestnut shells popped in the coals. A homely music, but yours. Your feet steer you out of the neighborhood of slates and chalk dust, back into the blur where fog meets smoke. The warmth of soup lingers in your belly, but hunger isn't so easily fooled. It circles back like a creditor knocking twice. Ahead, sound changes, harsher now, full of hoarse voices and coughing laughter. The smell changes, too, turning from barley broth to the sharp, biting tang of gin. You've wandered into one of London's gin palaces, bright as a lantern dropped in mud. Gaslight blazes behind wide glass panes, reflecting polished mirrors and gilded shelves stacked with bottles. The door swings wide, expelling a wave of warmth and chatter. For a moment, you hesitate, hand pressed to the frame. Then your stomach and the phantom taste of fire on the tongue coax you in. Inside, the contrast slaps you. You've been living in shades of gray, but here color riots. Red curtains, green glass, golden light. Crowds press against a counter that stretches like a ship's hull, clamoring for the cheap salvation poured from tall bottles. A penny buys a glass, tuppence if you want the stronger stuff. You stand near the door, trying to be invisible while your lungs adjust to air heavy with alcohol instead of soot. Mainstream fact. By the mid-19th century, London was littered with these gin palaces, part pub, part temple to intoxication. They were the bright counterbalance to the tenement's darkness, drawing in laborers, hawkers, and the unemployed alike. Reformers called them dens of ruin. Their patrons called them home. Historians still argue whether gin was the working man's escape or his downfall. Judging from the flushed faces around you, it's clearly both. Relief and ruin in a single swallow. Quirky tidbit. Some palaces advertised flash of lightning and thunder, a gin mixed with ginger beer, served to men who swore it chased off winter chills. You grin at the idea. If lightning could be bottled, you'd gladly drink the storm. You edge toward the counter, though your pockets still rattle with nothing but lint. A barmaid with hair piled high and eyes sharper than broken glass spots you. She smirks, recognizing the hunger without coin. Instead of chasing you off, she slides a splash into a chipped glass and winks. "End of the bottle," she says, though you know it's charity in disguise. You nod, throat tight, and toss it back. Fire rushes down, pooling in your chest. For a heartbeat, you're warm, almost human. The crowd surges, arguments breaking out over cards, over women, over nothing at all. A man boasts he once hauled 2 sacks at the docks in a single trip. Another swears he could outdrink the entire street. They laugh, then scuffle, then laugh again. You watch, noting how drink sharpens edges, even as it dulls pain. A preacher's voice interrupts, muffled by the din. He's planted outside, shouting about sin and damnation, his words dripping through cracks in the gin palace like rain through a broken roof. Nobody listens. One man throws a copper at the window, not out of generosity, but to make the voice rattle away. You sip the dregs of your gift, letting the afterburn settle into your bones. For a minute, hunger takes a step back, replaced by the illusion of plenty. But illusions are fragile. Already your head swims, not from quantity, but from contrast. Cold street to warm gin, empty belly to sudden fire. You set the glass down before it shatters in your shaking hand. Historians still argue whether temperance movements truly protected families or robbed them of their only comfort. You suspect the truth is simpler. Comfort is dangerous, but so is its absence. Between ruin by gin and ruin by hunger, the poor had to choose their poison. Quirky scene. A fiddler climbs onto a stool, scraping out a tune so sharp it could cut glass. Patrons stamp and clap, some attempting dance, most failing gloriously. You chuckle as a man twice your size nearly collapses trying a jig. The barmaid brushes past again, dropping a heel of bread into your palm. "Don't faint in my palace," she mutters. You grin, mutter thanks, and chew gratefully. Stale, but it blunts the edge of emptiness. Around you, the night deepens, though the room never dims. Gaslight keeps time here, not the sun. Men stagger out, others stumble in. The cycle, endless. You linger until the warmth makes you bold enough to believe you belong. But belonging costs coin, and when the barmaid's mercy is spent, you know you must leave. The cold slaps you again as you step outside. The preacher is gone, chased off by drunks or despair. Fog presses back into your lungs, heavier now after gin's brief illusion of fire. You lean against the wall, stomach settling into its familiar hollow. For a flicker, you regret leaving, but you know better. Stay too long, and mercy turns to suspicion. Suspicion brings the constable. You pull your coat tighter and move on, ears still ringing with fiddle tunes, throat still warm from gin. The palace shrinks behind you, but its glow lingers in your memory, a little golden lie tucked among the city's gray truths. And as you vanish back into the fog, you know the lie was worth it, even if only for a sip. The night gnaws on, and your steps wander again without aim, only rhythm. Heel, toe, cough, heel, toe, cough. Somewhere beyond the fog, a bell tolls midnight, and the city shifts into its after-hours skin. The respectable shutter their lamps, while another London, yours, wakens with sharper teeth. You round a corner, and there they are, the shadows moving with purpose, too quick to be mere wanderers, too sly to be lost. A lad no older than 15 leans against a lamppost, whistling a tune too cheerful for his tattered coat. Beside him, a girl with a ribbon fraying at the edge watches passers-by with eyes that missed nothing. They're part of the invisible guild, the underworld's apprentices. You've seen them before, snatching bread, lifting purses, vanishing down alleys like smoke. Tonight, curiosity drags you closer, though instinct hisses caution. Mainstream fact, Victorian London's crime was practically an industry, organized and omnipresent. Pickpockets, cracksmen, fences, and prostitutes formed a shadow economy as bustling as the docks. Some neighborhoods were so notorious, police entered only in groups. To be poor was to live at its edge. To be desperate was to fall inside. You lean against cold brick, watching. The lad spots a tipsy clerk fumbling with his watch chain. In a blink, the watch vanishes into the boy's palm. The clerk, confused, pats himself down as the pair melt into the alley. You almost laugh, not at the theft, but at the clerk's drunk surprise, as if his valuables should be grateful for the ride. Historians still argue whether poverty drove crime or whether Londoners exaggerated slum villainy to scare Parliament into reforms. Either way, the streets testify louder than the pamphlets. Hunger and opportunity shake hands here nightly. Quirky tidbit. Some thieves trained monkeys to snatch coins or silk handkerchiefs from unsuspecting gentlemen. Imagine losing your wallet to a pickpocket with a tail. You glance into the shadows, half expecting a small, furry accomplice to tip its cap at you. You drift deeper into the alleys, guided by muffled laughter. A door creaks open onto a flash house, a thieves' tavern hidden in plain sight. Inside, candles gutter, ale slops over tables, and deals are struck with nods sharper than knives. A fiddler scrapes a tune, same as in the gin palace. But here, the rhythm is slyer, quicker, a background for whispers. You linger near the doorway, cautious. A hulking man with scars marking his face like tally lines sizes you up. He grins. New blood? You shake your head quickly. He shrugs, already busy haggling over a haul of boots too fine to belong to anyone in this room. Historians still argue whether police infiltration of such dens was effective or laughable. Tonight, it looks laughable. The constable's lantern is leagues away. Here, the only law is barter and blade. A girl sidles up, shawl wrapped tight. Looking for work? Her voice is all invitation, no warmth. You hesitate. Work, yes, but not like this. She reads your silence and snorts. Suit yourself, the world eats softer men first. She vanishes into the crowd. Your stomach knots. For a heartbeat, the underworld feels less frightening than inviting. Money, bread, a place to belong. But then the fiddler's bow snaps, men roar, and a knife flashes in lamplight. You recoil, remembering your father's knife still tucked at your ribs. Yours is for survival. Theirs is for sport. The difference is thin, but enough to send you fleeing back into the cold air. Outside, fog swallows you gratefully, cleansing the stink of gin and sweat. You breathe deeper, even if the air still tastes of coal. Somewhere behind, laughter bursts again, cruel and carefree. You know you'll hear echoes of it in dreams, twisting into shapes worse than hunger. Quirky observation. Newspapers printed lurid tales of juvenile delinquents to shock middle-class readers at breakfast. You imagine one of those readers spitting tea over their marmalade, scandalized that children could lift purses while their own offspring learn Latin verbs. If only they'd trade places for one night. You turn a corner and nearly stumble into a constable making his rounds. His lantern beam slides over you like judgment itself. You bow your head, hoping invisibility still works. He squints, but passes, muttering about rogues and thieves. You exhale, limbs loosening. You've brushed both edges of the law tonight, preacher's sermon, thief's flash house, and found safety in neither. You pull your coat closer, knife pressing cold against your side. The city whispers options. Lawful work denied you, unlawful work offering too much. You walk on, steps uncertain, ears straining for another rhythm, one less dangerous, less damning. Somewhere, you hope, London hums a kinder tune. You angle away from the lamplight where the constable's gaze just passed and listen for a different bell. The small, stubborn one you heard last night. There, 3 soft notes drifting through alleys like a hand on your sleeve. You follow, shoulders hunched, breath a white ribbon ahead of you until the church-turned mission swims out of the fog. The queue is back too. Coats, shawls, caps, all steamed a little by hope. You slip into it as if resuming a sentence you paused earlier. The door yawns, and warm air pulls you forward. Inside, the same hall, rafters dark as old tea, benches polished by tired backs, a table where a kettle sighs like a contented cat. The woman in the bonnet from yesterday recognizes your face in the ragged deck and nods you toward a seat. A ladle waits on a hook. A pot murmurs. The smell is honest. Peas, onion, faint ghost of bone. Your stomach, the city's most punctual clock, chimes on cue. Before soup, a hymn. It unspools rough and brave, the tune familiar as the cobbles. Voices split and mangle notes, but somehow the sound lands like a blanket anyway. You sing low. Your voice is a scuffed shoe, but it walks the line. A man in a plain coat takes the little platform. He's not a thundering pulpit lion, more a clerk whose duty tonight is souls. He speaks simply, work if you can, ask if you must. Keep your hands from other men's pockets and your heart from despair. You watch eyes around you, some raised, some shut, some fixed on the ladle that will follow. Mainstream fact threads through his words whether he knows it or not. London City mission men have been doing this since the 1830s, knocking on doors where doors barely exist, and a newer army, the Salvation one, has been marching since 1865, banging drums and boiling pots under banners that say, in effect, soup, soap, salvation. You can smell all three in this room. The first bubbling, the second folded in a pile by the pump, the third hovering in the way people's shoulders drop half an inch when warmth touches them. Historians still argue whether these missions softened poverty or pressed it into tidy lines, whether this is mercy, management, or both. You turn the question over like a coin you don't own and decide the answer doesn't change the soup's temperature. The ladle dips, the bowl fills. Your hands stop shaking for a minute. Philosophy can queue behind hunger. The sermon curls toward temperance. The man holds up a teacup, not a bottle. There is fire that burns and leaves you fed, he says, tipping the cup, and fire that burns and leaves you empty. A few men stare at their boots. You think of the gin palace glow that still floats behind your eyes like a candle after you blow it out. Quirky tidbit slides across your mind. In some wards, they're opening cocoa rooms and coffee taverns, bright as pubs, but with mugs of thick cocoa instead of gin, hoping a sweeter fire will woo the cold-boned. You picture your cough rising from a cup like a beneficent spirit and nearly laugh. The hymn returns, shorter this time, the key wobbling like a handcart on bad paving. Then bowls move hand to hand. Your turn comes, a tin vessel warm enough to make your fingertips hiss. You retreat to a wall and drink slowly. The soup is thin but intent on doing good. The bread is yesterday's but patient with your teeth. Around you, need rearranges itself into gentleness. A boy shares a corner of his loaf with a woman whose hands shake. The bonneted woman ties a rough scarf around a baby's chest with a tenderness that ought to be billable as medicine. A man who entered scowling now stares at steam as if it were a snow globe showing a better world. You watch faces thaw, not all the way, never all the way, but enough that conversation begins. A bed rumored at a lodging house, a foreman said to be fair, a cough worse at night, a prayer small as a button. The man in the plain coat produces cards with printed verses. He hands them out, not like tickets to heaven, but like bookmarks for the next hard hour. Some tuck them careful as relics. Others, practical to the marrow, slide them up sleeves. Firelighters, if the wind bullies the matchbox. Nobody scolds. Even saints must boil water. A volunteer with ink-stained fingers, teacher by the look, sets up a slab of chalkboard and writes, "Help wanted, Porter Holborn." Strong back. Heads tilt like sunflowers. You study the script as if you could lift the letters themselves and carry them to a desk in exchange for coin. The teacher catches your eye, tips the chalk as if to say, morning is another audition. Be early. They open a side room for the sit-ups, benches and ropes, the pennies suspended in the air because enough coins were turned into tonight's soup. You've mocked those ropes before, but relief flickers anyway. A place to nod without a baton waking you. You weigh your options, the arch under the rails, the alley you half claimed last night, this room thick with breath but thin with danger. And let your body answer. It steps toward the rope before pride can file an objection. Before you sleep, another cup. This time tea, the missionary kind that tastes of boiled cudgel and good intentions. You sip it gladly. It is hot, and being hot is the point. Someone begins a softer song, not a hymn exactly, but kin to one, about green fields far from smoke. The tune grazes your dream from earlier and herds it gently toward the present. You let your head bow. The rope presses your chest. The bench edges into your thighs. Your hands find their way into your coat's safer caverns. In this posture, you'll become a hinge, part door, part wall, neither open nor closed, but able to hold until morning. The room dims by inches. The ladle knocks the pot's bottom like a clock. The man in the plain coat douses lamps one by one, leaving a halo of glow that maps faces as if they were islands on a warm sea. You think of the girl with leaning letters, the docker's ropes, the pawn shop's 3 golden balls, the chestnut pan. In your pocket, the alphabet from earlier arranges itself again. S for soup, R for rope, M for mercy, T for tomorrow. You drift, caught in a place where sermons blur to murmur and breath becomes music. Somewhere, a cough remembers you and taps at your ribs. You answer, quiet, and it lets you be. Outside, the fog rearranges its furniture. Inside, bodies soften around you into a precarious kind of safety. A truce with the cold. A treaty with despair that expires at dawn and can be renegotiated if the kettle still has something to say. When sleep takes you, it does not ask for coin or creed. It simply weighs your eyelids and lowers them like shutters. The last thing you notice is a verse card someone has left near your foot. You cannot read it in the dim, but you appreciate its shape. A small white square of intention in a city that too often writes you in pencil. You tuck it into your pocket with the chalk dust from morning and the crumb from the gin palace bread. A shrine of ordinary salvations. The rope digs in. Your spine protests, then relents. Breath slows. The mission's door stays closed to the wind. For a few hours, hunger has a quiet room, and you, who have walked all night among knives and fog and bells, have this, a bench, a rope, a bowl-shaped memory of warmth, and the knowledge that when morning knocks, you will stand to meet it. Morning returns without asking if you wanted it. A shuffle of boots, a cough that grows teeth, the creak of benches. These are your alarm bells. The mission hall is already stirring, lamps relit, kettle rattling again like a horse champing bit. You peel yourself off the rope, chest sore where it pressed. For a second, you feel taller, as if the rope had stretched you into someone more upright. Then the ache in your ribs reminds you, still you, still here. Volunteers bustle. The woman in the bonnet passes out crusts left from last night, thinner than hope, but edible. You chew while rubbing warmth back into your hands. Someone near the chalkboard mentions again the porter job at Holborn, and you listen harder this time. Hunger has a way of sharpening ears. Mainstream fact. London's casual labor market was infamous for its call-on system, workers waiting outside gates at dawn, hoping to be chosen, often dismissed without pay by noon. Docks, markets, construction sites all played the same cruel lottery. The missions board is your ticket stub for today's drawing. You step into fog that feels thicker for having known warmth. Breath clouds before you, ribs still humming with the rope's echo. The streets are already alive, milk carts rattling, boys crying, newspapers, women hawking hot tea from tin urns slung on yokes. You blend into the tide, heading toward Holborn, feet carrying you more from memory than map. Quirky tidbit. Some street vendors sold penny ices, even in winter, claiming the cold treat chased away coughs better than hot broth. You shake your head. London never lacks salesmen of miracles. Holborn's market square yawns wide, stalls groaning under meat, vegetables, cloth. Carters whip horses, boys jostle for loads, and above it all hangs the smell of fish gone slightly too far. A knot of men clusters near a gate, the foreman's hat visible like a periscope. You join the cluster, shoulders squared, stomach tight. Historians still argue whether these labor scrambles built character or broke it. From where you stand, pressed between elbows and desperation, you suspect mostly the latter. The foreman eyes the crowd, selects a handful with the calm of a farmer choosing chickens. His finger never points your way. You stand straighter, willing your back to look broader, your legs steadier. Still, no nod. The chosen file inside, the gate claps shut. The rest of you sag as one organism. Someone mutters about trying Covent Garden, another curses and spits. You breathe deep, cough, then decide not to chase this morning's coin down another street. The city offers 1,000 maybes, but you can only chase so many before your boots wear thin. You drift along Holborn's edge, where bookshops and stationers line the road. A printer's boy sweeps inked scraps into the gutter. One flutters near your shoe. You stoop, pluck it up. It's a misprinted handbill, letters backward, words ghosting like reflections in glass. You grin. Quirky tidbit. Some poor folk use these spoiled sheets as makeshift wallpaper, patching damp holes with Shakespeare printed sideways. Imagine living inside an upside-down sonnet. The handbill smears ink onto your thumb, a new stain to join the collection. You tuck it away. Paper has uses, even ruined. Further down, a group of boys wrestles a costermonger's barrow stuck in muck. He curses, they laugh, wheels squeal. You lend a shove, mud sucking at your boots. Together you free it, and the man, half grateful, presses a bruised apple into your hand. You bow slightly, bite into it. The fruit is soft, tart, glorious. Breakfast by accident tastes sweeter than soup by charity. Historians still argue whether markets like these exploited or empowered costermongers. You watch them bark prices louder than church bells and wonder if the answer is both. Survival wears many hats, most of them battered. A man with spectacles hawks magic lantern shows from a crate of posters. He waves one at you, phantoms projected on sheets, whole worlds for a penny. You laugh, knowing you can't spare the coin. You walk on, apple core in pocket for later, gnawing, ink-stained scrap fluttering against your coat. The day is still young, but the hope from the chalkboard has thinned, stretched like butter scraped over too much bread. You consider circling back to the mission for news, or drifting toward Smithfield to sniff work among the carcasses. But first you pause, leaning against a lamppost. Your breath still fogs, your legs still ache, but your ribs are straighter than yesterday. Rope sleep or soup, you can't say which gave you this sliver of spine. The city may not nod your way today, but the day is not finished. You push off the lamppost and let your boots choose another street. The lamppost leaves its chill stamped into your back as you drift east, following the smell of smoke and something heavier, iron, oil, sweat. Soon the clang begins, hammer on metal, bellows wheezing, sparks flashing in the gray air. You've stumbled near a cluster of small workshops where blacksmiths, coppersmiths, and tinkerers hammer London's bones back together. The noise is merciless, but it feels alive. You pause at a doorway, peering inside. A smith swings his hammer with the rhythm of a drummer, striking white-hot iron that hisses louder than any preacher. For a moment, you're hypnotized. Heat, sparks, strength. The forge is both terrifying and magnetic, like staring at a bonfire when you've been living in fog. Mainstream fact. Victorian London thrummed with small workshops as much as with great factories. Industry wasn't just sprawling mills in the north. It was also cramped forges, tailors' attics, and cobblers' basements right here in the city. Behind every polished shop front lay the clatter of hidden labor. You step back before the foreman notices you. No coin for tools, no apprenticeship papers, nothing but willing hands and lungs already half broken by smoke. A boy barely older than you lugs coal past, black dust turning him into a walking shadow. His cough is deeper than yours. Historians still argue whether apprenticeships of the era rescued boys from starvation or trapped them in lifelong servitude. Watching this lad vanish under a load twice his size, you think the truth is balanced precariously on both anvil and scale. Quirky tidbit. Some smiths swore by horseshoe luck, hanging a freshly forged shoe above their door to ward off misfortune. You eye one nailed to the doorway and mutter a bargain with it. If you've got spare luck, drop some in my pocket. Leaving the forge, you follow the river's stink and the rising clamor of carts. The Thames isn't far, and its banks are always teeming with labor. Today, the tide is low, exposing mud like black lungs. Barges squat heavy in the water, waiting for shoulders and backs to unload them. You edge toward a gang of men shifting crates. The foreman's eye sweeps over you, lingers, then shakes his head. Too thin, too tired. You nearly argue, but his stare is iron. Instead, you sit on a piling, pretending the river called you here just to rest. Quirky tidbit. Dredgers sometimes found strange treasures in the Thames, Roman coins, daggers, even a whole suit of armor once, dragged up in a fisherman's net. You wonder if the river hoards history the way pawnbrokers hoard watches. Beside you, an old dockman lights his pipe and nods. He tells you, without asking if you wanted to hear, that once he saw a sturgeon longer than a carriage hauled up here, enough meat to feed half Whitechapel. You smile faintly, imagining biting into fish steak instead of crust. Historians still argue whether river laborers were the backbone of London's trade or its most disposable cogs. You watch them sweat, muscles glistening, and know both are true. When the tide rises, so do they. When it ebbs, they scatter like gulls. The old dockman eyes you. Hungry? He asks. You nod. He passes you a heel of bread that's been in his pocket long enough to taste of tobacco. You chew gratefully. It scratches down your throat. but fills the silence between heartbeats. A gull screeches above, dropping something white onto a barge canvas. The dockmen curse, laugh. You laugh too, surprised. As the day wanes, work slows. You wander back from the river, feet sore from standing and stomach steadied by borrowed bread. The clang of forges fades behind you, replaced by the hawkers' cries of twilight, eels, roasted nuts, penny pies. Your pockets protest, but your imagination dines richly. You pause at a bridge, watching fog curl off the river, swallowing towers and lamps alike. The Thames moves sluggish, patient, carrying barges and secrets alike. You lean on the stone, letting damp seep through your coat. In the water's reflection, London looks softer, dreamlike, though you know the smell ruins the illusion fast. You exhale. Today gave you nothing tangible, no wage, no steady bed. But still you walked, saw, learned, borrowed warmth where you could. Sometimes surviving is just stringing small mercies into a necklace and hoping it doesn't snap before night. And with that thought, you push off the bridge, boots slapping wet stone, ready to see which corner of the city will tolerate you next. The city drifts away from you now, softer with every breath. The clang of forges, the cries of markets, the coughing in mission halls, all of it melts into distance, as though London itself has decided to hush for the night. You are no longer trudging cobbles, no longer jostling at gates for work, no longer weighing a crust of bread like treasure. The sounds fade, the fog thins, and the cold sharpness softens at last into something bearable. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the weight of the rope, the rail arch, the stone benches slip from your back. You've carried the city all day, but here, in this gentle space, you can finally set it down. Imagine the Thames, not black and choking, but silver in the moonlight, its surface smooth as silk. Picture the gas lamps as quiet lanterns floating just for you, leading you along a safer road. Even the gulls, noisy thieves of daylight, settle into wings of silence. Your body remembers the soup's warmth, the apple's sweetness, the soft joke that made you smile even when hunger pressed hardest. You've stitched together a quilt of these small mercies, and now it spreads across you like a blanket. Breathe deeper, longer. Each breath is lighter than the last. Historians may still argue whether hope was possible in streets like these, but you have walked them, you have felt the roughness, and you have also found sparks that glow in the dark. That is enough. Tonight you rest, not as a body lost in fog, but as a traveler who has reached a pause, a still point. So let your eyes close. Let London drift away. Sleep takes the city's weight from your chest and leaves only the quiet promise of tomorrow.